done. We're going to talk about social emotional learning, and from there we're going to get into how do we assess our programs in terms of social emotional learning, and how do we then maybe take that work and take it further into audits. Because of that, the link that we keep posting in the chat is a social emotional learning programming assessment tool that I've worked up for you guys. It's a workbook that's about 8 pages, and we're going to walk through that today and actually do it. So we'll get a chance for you to really dive into who am I? What am I really good at? When I think about this one program, how do I understand what I'm actually communicating with my parents? Because a lot of this work, I feel like people are already doing. It's sort of like when we had the big talk about makerspaces, we began to realize like, oh yeah, I've been doing that for 10 years and I didn't even know that there was a language around it. So this is just a tool for you to understand that you're probably already doing a lot of this work and to give you some language that's really helpful. Then we'll talk about how social emotional learning and the Healing Library work together. And then we'll just go over a quick overview of how you can download kits and get started for free, and common concerns and solutions that people typically have. And yeah, it's gonna be really fun. Okay, so before we dive too far into this, I mentioned I get really excited, and I just wanna be sure that I'm sort of phrasing things the right way. So Kim's gonna pop up a poll. If you wanna tell me, are you a public librarian or a school librarian? What age range are you kind of focused on? Are you still working remotely? Are you back in your building? And as far as presenting programs goes, have you been remotely presenting, or are you at that, you know, Kim was great. She mentioned like we're slowly reopening ourselves and our spaces. And I'm wondering if anybody here has actually dove right into in-person programming within your buildings already. I'm gonna peek at sort of what comes up here. Oh, all publics. That's cool. I mean, I love my school librarians, but I was always public. So it's always great when we're all public because we understand that like the freedom we have, you know what I mean? And I think that as far as school librarians too, and we'll touch on this a little bit later, but school librarians, if they're working with SEL in particular, typically it's coming from someone else, an administrator or a school district that's trying to enforce it. And so they can wind up with some, again, they don't have all the freedoms that us public folks have. Cool, and it looks like almost everybody's voted now. So just in case, I'm gonna end polling and I'm just gonna read through this. So it looks like we've got, oh, one other. Cool, welcome other.
I think that is, who did I just let in here? Carol? I think I just let Carol in here. Carol, if that is Carol, if it's not Carol, it's someone else. Would you, if you're comfortable, why don't you go ahead and type in the chat, you know, what it is that you do, because we'd love to know.
Yeah, and my other age range people too, if you're adult librarians, do let yourselves be known. And okay, so let's see, I'm working from home. Oh, some folks are doing programs in their building, only 13%, but 88% of folks are still programming remotely. I'm gonna go ahead and end the polling. And I'm gonna click share results, Kim, okay?
Okay.
So everybody can see it. We had a teeny issue with this yesterday. So just gonna let everybody see here what we've got going on. And I can't see the chat, Kim, so if anybody did write in. So what's our other?
I don't know. We haven't had anyone type anything in yet, and that's all right. I know sometimes it takes a little bit, especially on tablets, things get mighty complicated. But if at any point anyone wants to type in what age ranges they work with, because they're not listed here, you know, or maybe you do something that's library adjacent, you know, like maybe you don't actually work in a library, but you do something kind of similar, feel free to type that in too. A benefit of that is that when, I was going to say I'm not doing anything, but as Megan goes through, you know, she can make sure to keep that in mind and sort of touch on ways that maybe you can adjust this work to suit your needs that are a little bit different from working with children.
Yeah, and please, if you do feel like I'm very heavily leaning on, let's just say like the public librarian side of working in the building, and you want to know what that perspective might be like, please just do pipe in and let me know. So I'm going to stop sharing the results so we can move on. But this gives me a really great idea. And it looks like we're mostly public librarians, and we are mostly working in the building or splitting your time between buildings and home. And that's what a lot of my friends who are librarians have been doing thus far. So I feel like good for you guys. Way to
And
go.
you know what? So we actually have someone who typed into the chat. Lynn, thank you so much for sharing. Lynn's actually the library director. So she is working to support her programmers and doesn't work directly with youth except for some school groups that come in. So that is a little different, but also really great, Lynn, that you're looking for ways to, to help support your staff too, because goodness knows.
Thank you so much for being a director who would be willing to have this conversation with your staff and come to a training like this. I'm so excited. Oh, great. So if you feel too, Lynn, like you can chime in with some director perspective, if we're getting bogged down in a place about talking to administration, please feel free to offer suggestions about how people might phrase things or carry those ideas up the ladder. All right, back to our slides. Right, so we're gonna start just with an overview of what the Healing Library is. And full disclosure, just in case people's screens are glitching or anything, I am probably gonna read quite a bit of the text that's on the slides. I won't do it for every single one, but if I feel it's a very important critical idea to what we're discussing, I'll probably read, like this slide. So the Healing Library has been developed to start families on their unique journey of healing following or during periods of trauma in their lives. So far, 5 kits have been developed to assist families with healing through social emotional learning while teaching parents the skills of looking critically at picture books and utilizing them to communicate with children. And the reason that I really like to read that out is that most of us know, sure, there's a book for every reader, but just because you give the right person the right book doesn't mean they'll be able to engage with it as deeply as a librarian could assist them in engaging with that book. So we really have taken the opportunity to show parents how they can dive deeper into the artwork and the text and the ideas in picture books. Since our launch in fall of 2017, we just broke over 11,500 downloads of our materials, which I'm so thrilled about because actually, Kim, when we met like 2 months ago, we've had 1,000 downloads since the release of the COVID kit.
Wow.
Pretty cool. And I should probably mention that the downloads have come from not just the US, but all over the world. And it's been really exciting to watch, especially as our British libraries are going through such struggles, and seeing the maps of that, the fact that people are downloading these materials over there makes me feel pretty good about, in my small way, I can support another system that's struggling. So our team consists of 4 incredible people. Bonnie Thomas is a licensed clinical social worker who owns Indigo North Counseling. She's based out of Maine. And she's probably the critical key player here because everything that we create, we run through Bonnie, or Bonnie writes in addition to what we've created, to ensure that the ideas that we're discussing are ethically sound. So is the language appropriate? Are the activities always beneficial? And are we reaching as diverse an audience as possible? Kirsten Cappy, if you're not familiar with Curious City, holy moly, go sign up. It's an incredible free resource for librarians and teachers. She has a ton of book giveaways. She focuses primarily on independently published high quality titles. So like Child's Play, she loves Child's Play books. And because she has such great relationships with them, she'll get to do really great giveaways. And she creates story time or programming, sort of one-pagers or sample activities that people can do based around these books. In addition, if you're familiar with Diverse Bookfinder, she's on, I forget if it's their board or she's a founding member. She, in addition, has another project that started actually because of the Healing Library that has to do with immigration and children, and it's called, I'm spacing it right now, but I'm gonna look it up during our first break and get back to you. I'm gonna make myself a note. Kirsten's bookshelf, but basically it's a bookshelf of children's books focused around the immigration experience that libraries can borrow and host programming around for their immigrants and their immigrant communities. And then finally, my 2 guys, David Moorhead was a librarian that I worked with when we were first starting the project. It actually came about as an independent internship I did while I was attending Syracuse to get my IMLS. I had to have a librarian involved. And David was the first librarian I worked heavily around the idea of non-traditional lending with. We would do telescopes and American Girl dolls. And I wound up helping an organization in Maine start developing science kits that multiple libraries could borrow. And I think that my favorite one was a CSI kit for children about a missing teddy bear and how to take fingerprints and assess fibers. And so he was obviously a person who should be involved. And then finally, my buddy Gordon Liu, who's also located in Maine, he is just a fabulous graphic designer and content shaper. And I love him. So I mentioned that there are 5 kits. Thus far, these are the kits we've created: Alzheimer's and your family, the death of a pet, the death of a loved one, separation and divorce, and most recently, COVID-19. Now, when we come to actually opening these kits up, it's most helpful. And since I can't give you one in person to like paw through and open all the little pieces, hopefully the pictures will help do it justice. The first thing that you'll find when you open up a kit is a guide for librarians. It'll tell you how to build a kit yourself, what exact pieces to purchase. There are lending suggestions from Bonnie to ensure that your families are getting the most out of the materials that they are handed. An explanation about what the kits are and what the kits are not, and we'll get into that a little bit later. And then there are printable labels too. So we started this from the librarian perspective of how do we give this away? How do we do this hard work together as a team and then share it with everybody for free? So we've really tried to generate these materials so that you can download for free one document and then print off everything you need and assemble the pieces from your own closets. Following that, there's a guide for families, which is just a single sheet of paper that explains to them, here's what you have in your hands. There's no wrong way to start using this, but best practices like moving forward, here's how to dig into what you've got. I should mention, this slide's a good one to do it, that in addition to the materials that you physically assemble yourself and lend, which we'll get to in a couple of slides, we encourage families to keep these printed off sheets of paper if they're resonating with themselves as parents and their parenting style, or if an activity or a book guide, for example, is resonating with their child. Pull that out, keep it, so that when you continue this journey after you've returned your kit, you have as many resources as possible that are helpful to you. Following that, there's a discussion guide to help navigate for parents dealing with these tricky subjects with the child. So a good example is in our Death of a Pet kit, we talk about the idea of heaven. And you might be a family that has religious beliefs that are in line with the idea of heaven, and you might not be a family that has religious a religious identity that aligns with the idea of heaven. And if you're one of those people that doesn't believe in heaven, we have all these things that were either done to us as children or that are just easy to do with kids to try and comfort them in a moment. And so it's so easy to say that your dog has passed away, but it's okay because they're in a better place, they're in heaven. And if that's not an idea that you've ever discussed with a child before, that can be very confusing. So don't do that. You can talk about what and another example is your child may hear from another friend, oh, your dog is in heaven now. And if they come to you asking what is heaven, how to have an honest discussion with them about that idea that's constructive and that allows for them to be building their toolkit of dealing with trauma and grief in a beneficial way, so that as they move forward through their healing process, they don't wind up with more questions and concerns. Following that, there's what we call the Healing Activities Guide, which is, depending on the activity, sometimes it's a step-by-step process. Other times it's more like, here are all the materials you need, and here's the idea about what this activity is. But it's basically a guide to let families work their way through several kinds of activities that are art or play-based therapy activities. And again, this is where Bonnie is so fabulous, because she is a family counselor who focuses on youth and art and play holistic-based therapeutic activities. And I know that's a mouthful, but that's really what we root all of our activities in. Following that, all of the kits come with components to participate in those activities on the spot. Our thinking behind this was more in like user-based design. So if I'm a grieving mother, I shouldn't have to do the research of how do I even talk to my child about the fact that their dog died. That's our discussion guide. We help you with that. I shouldn't have to go out and research activities that we can do to make them feel better. So that's in our activities guide. But beyond that, you shouldn't be given then a shopping list and in many people's cases, potentially debt for your children to participate in these healing and therapeutic activities. So by providing the materials, we take down that barrier and really open up a lot to a lot of children and families. Okay, now this one is a little weird. So acts of kindness, these are sort of like activities, but it's about communicating and connecting with the greater community who's also experienced or engaged in the trauma that you're involved in. So let's just say your children have lost their grandparent recently due to breast cancer. The Acts of Kindness Guide would encourage you to be loving towards the people that were helping that grandparent in passing. It may have been hospice workers or hospital workers or even a family doctor that you've all used forever. So how to be kind to those people who were helping your loved one in an effort to not let this tragedy be defined only by sadness, but to give you opportunities of growth through providing kindness to others and empathy to others. Beyond that, and your close social circle, there may be opportunities for you to connect with a greater organization. So breast cancer survivors, support groups that exist in your area, or larger organizations that you may not know about. This area gets more into that community side. So it's going to explain for our parents the types of adults that can be helpers to you during this time. And you can see the screen shows school helpers and some examples of those, but it may also be religious leaders and just reminding people that even if you've never gone to church or shul, or it's been a long time since you returned to your mosque, it's never too late. And those people are always welcoming to families who need their assistance. So beyond that, it's pretty specific to the type of trauma within each kit. Our hoping is that by keeping it broad, you can then, once you've downloaded, you can supplement this area with local organizations who may be of further assistance to these families. So it could be business cards, it could be flyers, which would be really exceptional to include. And again, then your family on their own is able to go through these materials, pull out the ones that they feel would be most beneficial for them, and keep them so that they don't necessarily have to have that reference interaction with us when the kid is returned. Although back in the librarian's guide, there's a little mention about how when the kid is returned, how to assist your families moving forward. Okay, and now the books, of course, the books. So we curated a list of picture books for each of these titles. There's one exception, and that's our separation and divorce kit, and I'll get to that in a moment. But I and my team have read easily hundreds of books per kit to really pare down to the best of what's available in the sense of diversity. And when I say diversity, I mean multiple things. There is obvious types of diversity, like the sex of the main character, boy or girl. There's obvious diversity in terms of the race of the main characters or the supporting characters. And typically in books like this, you find that it's families that are represented. So usually it's the same race throughout the book. But beyond that, there's a lot of experiential diversity that when you're dealing with something, and again, I'll refer to the death of a pet kit because that's a really easy one to understand. So a child who's borrowing a kit about the death of a pet may be losing their cat, or they may be losing their dog, or it might be a horse in some people's case. I don't have a horse book. If you know a really fabulous picture book about losing your horse, let me know in the chat. There are also snakes. There aren't really good reptile books out there. So what we found was, how do we try and create the best possible mix of the physical types of diversity in ability and race and sex, and the experiential diversity? And so depending on what was available, one list might have 6 books, one list might have 12. And that's just because there's more books about the death of a loved one or a pet than there are about Alzheimer's. So like I mentioned before, you can give the right book to the right person, but that doesn't mean that they'll understand how to engage with it. And as I was creating the kits, I recognized, oh, I've got to write a book discussion guide for every title that we're dealing with. And that means a page-by-page breakdown of here's what's happening to explain to the parent, like on this end paper, you'll see that the child's mother's sweater is represented in the art. As you continue, that theme keeps happening, and here's what that means. Because of this, the page-by-page breakdown, we put in both discussion prompts that you can have with your child. So saying things like, she looks really unhappy in this photo or in this picture. Can you tell me what you think she's thinking? So getting, I always forget that word, dialogic. Is it dialogic reading, Kim?
That sounds smart and correct. So let's just use that.
I think that's the word, dialogic reading. So asking probing questions to get the child to open up potentially. But beyond that, you may notice that your child is experiencing something that either they cannot or do not want to vocalize. So the observation prompts are also involved in these book discussion guides.
Amy has confirmed that yes, that was the correct word.
Oh, Amy, thank you. Since I had a baby, I'm telling you, like they're a whole piece. I can't remember the word for the thing you put your laundry in that washes it. I call it a laundry box, and it's been 2 years.
The washing machine?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. So I'm really proud that I got dialogic reading. Thank you, Amy.
It's also called COVID brain, so don't stress.
Thank you. Oh, you guys, I'm never leaving this Zoom meeting.
I mean, you can be like an honorary Connecticut librarian. We'll accept you with arms wide open.
Brilliant. And so beyond that, we also wanted to, not have to make our parents think too hard when they're probably experiencing their own trauma and grief as well as their child's, and raising that child through grief for potentially the first time. So we have references back to the other parts of the kit where we'll say, if your child is resonating with this book and the idea of a memorial service is enticing, check out the activities guide for how to perform a memorial service for your pet. Or back to the discussion guide for how to understand what stage of grief your child is probably experiencing if they are showing this or that. So about the books. Yay, books! So you'll see that when I was talking about diversity before, this is every title that we put together, and I love, especially the Alzheimer's books, like people were on it with the diversity in that area, that you had family members who were mostly grandmothers, which I thought was really interesting, but there is one about a grandfather who develops Alzheimer's. The children who are engaging with those people are either they're so young and androgynous you can't tell, and so a boy or girl could relate. But if you look at things like Death of a Loved One, you've got your animal books in there. You've got When Dinosaurs Die. I was not a huge fan of that book, but it was the only one I found that dealt with murder and violent death. And so I thought it was important to include for that reason. Moving over to the death of a pet, you'll see we've got dogs, cats, and pocket pets. Again, no lizards. I didn't find any great bird or horse books, so if you have any suggestions, I'm always looking for those. The separation and divorce book, the reason there's only one is that we were actually approached by Barefoot Books, who I love Barefoot Books and all the mindfulness stuff that they do and yoga, and I love them. But they approached our group and along with the author of this book here and there and said, we think that this could be a really good fit for what you do. Would you create a kit for us? And just between us librarians, not every book is good. So I was like, well, I would like to review the book with my team and determine if it's the right fit for us as well. And come to find that this is a book about a child, Ivan, who's in the red shirt there, and his parents have just separated or divorced. It's not clear. So it works for either situation. So that was already a tick. He has a white father and a mother who's Black. And so that worked really well for our diversity checkboxes. But then the way that the parents, I'm getting goosebumps. The way that the parents dealt with the situation through art and through nature, we realized this is a really good book. And so we agreed to create this kit with the author, Tam Ellis Smith, who's brilliant. So that's the reason there's only one in that kit. And the kit itself is, we'll look at them in a moment to see physically, like how big are these things? We themed it very heavily around Ivan's experience. And so there's a ukulele inside that one. And there's a backpack we found that almost perfectly matches I honestly, I think except for the white tag on the front, it perfectly matches Ivan's backpack that he's taking from here to there. Okay, now I'm gonna buzz through this kind of quickly, but I know that it's a hot subject right now. So this is one of those areas where I really want you to feel like you can interject and interrupt and post those questions. But before we jump into it, does anybody have a question about what we just reviewed?
I'm going to say that Amy, before anyone hits questions, suggested there's a book, The Dead Bird by Margaret Wise Brown. Not sure if that's in your, that's in there? Okay, awesome, awesome.
But you know what, Amy, I put that in my Death of a Loved One kit because I thought it was the most tender handling of memorial services with children. And I've so many times thought that I should put it in the Death of a Pet kit, but I always, where I stumble, and give me your opinion, your honest opinion, Amy, where I stumble is it's no one's pet and it's sort of accidental in a found situation. So is that appropriate? Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
It's definitely more of a general death and that poignancy of seeing an animal, which like how can you not see? You see all the time. So I agree with you. It's not exactly a pet. It's not exactly a loved one. It's that just sort of poignancy of death generally. So I mean, honestly, you could go in all the kits.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. It's one of those.
It was like just slippery enough, but I think eventually I'm going to do it because when it comes to, we responded to libraries, and I'm supposed to get to this later, but I'll tell you now because I can't help myself. We really pride ourselves on responding to what our librarians tell us in creating new kits or deciding what as a business, and we're a small shop, like it's me, and then I piecemeal hire my team out, what to do next. And one of the things we kept hearing from smaller and rural libraries was that they loved the idea, but they didn't have staff capacity or time to actually assemble kits. And so where could they buy them? And I was like, well, we didn't, we don't do that. This is for free. And it just felt kind of icky at the time. And by like the 20th person who asked me, I was like, oh, okay, this is crowdsourcing. This is me and my ideas of librarianship getting in the way of offering people what they're asking for. So we do offer them for sale now. And all that roundabout way to say, when I work with a librarian or a library to purchase a kit, I, as a consultant, always want to touch base with, so who's your community? Let's talk about your diversity of experience, your diversity, your racial diversity, your census data, and who's in the room that's going to be borrowing these kits. And like twice or three times now, it's come up that we'd love to have like a cat, a dog, and a bird. Like, well, I have the perfect bird book, but it's not shaped that way. So I should probably change it.
Just put the bird everywhere.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Amy, for saying that again. And I think you're the straw that's breaking my camel's back.
And so if anyone else, feel free to unmute, guys, really. Like this is a relatively small group. So you are, well, if I mute you, it's not because I don't want you to say anything. It's just because we're picking up like some background noise. Unmute yourself if you can't figure out how, like send me a message and we'll work through it. But carry on, Megan.
Cool. All right. So moving into the COVID kits, we started in 2017 when nobody was thinking about, or I shouldn't say when we all weren't thinking about remote programming to the extent that we are now. And so when, again, crowdsourcing, I thought, I didn't think COVID was an appropriate topic for us initially because we are a lending experience and it seemed very unsafe. And a few of my librarians who had purchased kits or downloaded kits that I've talked to and just keep up relationships with were like, okay, where's the COVID kit? We're waiting. And I was like, well, you think I should do that? And I got so many people again saying yes. And then I finally decided to do it. And it was a real struggle for me. It took me about a month. The writing took me about a month. And it's not just because of the 18-month-old who lives on me, but just figuring out how do we tenderly and sensitively, again, write something like this for everyone when we're all going through such vastly different experiences. And how do I make a kit that's not intended to be lent, but potentially kept or distributed digitally and never returned? So I had to make some changes. So I'm not going to read all of the stuff in the sections. I'm just going to focus on the changes that we made because we've already just sort of gone through this. But in the librarian guide, the sections are listed. The changes that I had to go through were about how to assemble the kit. And so I have a small guide in there for if you want to, if you're assembling the kit for yourself to then present virtually through programming online, or are you assembling these kits to potentially give as to-go programs? And so there are printing instructions that, oh, and the other challenge with a kit like this is that the information kept changing so quickly and new resources would pop up so quickly that I wanted to ensure that, again, we had the highest quality information possible for our parents. Like, no fake news options allowed, and if the CDC is changing something, then I have to change something, just as one example. So in the assembly suggestions, when you get to printing, because we've got to make this as easy as possible on you, if you're doing to-go kits, you need to know how many sheets of paper you're talking about. So how many sheets of paper are going to be in this thing? What are the books that I can download and print to send out to my patrons? What kind of kit containers might work for either of these situations? Things like Ziploc bags or envelopes that you don't lick, you use those sticker things. And activity materials that are either very low cost so that you can afford to send, you know, hundreds, or I don't know your budgets. I know some of you have awesome budgets, thousands of these things out, versus doing it in-house, purchasing really high quality materials that you can do a good job displaying with potentially. But again, like you know, this is also new to all of us. How do we do this without breaking the bank?
And also and then, a plug, yeah. Do not forget that the Connecticut State Library has LSTA grants, and one of the grants that we have is a literacy grant. You might be able to take this program and write it in a way that it's appropriate for literacy grants. We have this money that literally exists for us to give away and don't get nearly the quantity of applications that you would think you would get when like someone's handing money away. Grants are hard. There are stipulations. I absolutely understand. But by all means, look into it.
These, so I have a library I've been working with in Vermont, actually, this spring, who had a grant awarded pre-COVID and could no longer perform those activities. And so she and I talked and worked through the language and the rewrite for her so that she could submit a change in plan. And she actually just purchased 5 of our kits. And she's going to be creating videos for families of like women in shelters and parenting groups and local health organizations so that they can experience these activities on their own and share the videos with people. And it all started with her saying, hey, like, I know I can't read the books online and record that, but can I read your materials? And I was like, oh my God, yes, please, please do that. Like, let's get this as far as possible. I have another library I worked with in Montana, Missoula, who she was having a hard time explaining in her own mind. She was like, how do I just expect the question will be, why would I purchase one of these when I could go to my closet and make one, but I don't have the time. And I also don't like our markers or whatever. And so we worked through that together. So like Kim said, if you want to apply for a grant and you feel like you need a little help shaping, I'm here for that. And I'd be happy to work with you. Just reach out. You'll get my email at the end. So then a couple of tips about distributing the materials. Are you doing it remotely? Are you doing it physically? Are you doing it digitally? So there are some tips in the guide, and that's sort of how this section changed. As far as the discussion guide, most everything was the same. How to explain this to your kids honestly, how to talk without scaring them. But the one section that was really different is I included a couple of articles for the parents that were just supportive to say, this is hard. You're probably already doing a good job and you need to give yourself a little wiggle room and just allow yourself to be human and not a super parent. As far as books to share and discuss, the big change was I didn't have any physical materials. So for me, as a person that reviews, I mentioned hundreds of books to determine what's going to go in a kit and what's appropriate. I knew of a couple of books that would be great that are physical materials, but I also knew that I couldn't get, I was like everybody else scared, and my library was closed down to the public, so I couldn't get those materials in my hands, and I wasn't sure if I should order them from even Amazon to review. And so I was like, well, I cannot write a page-by-page discussion guide any longer. What I need to do.
I'm going to tell Dina to talk.
Got it.
Oh, okay, not a question.
No, it was just a pickup. Yeah, I think.
Okay, so I was, where was I? Oh,
you were going to reach out.
Yeah, I couldn't do the page-by-page thing. So I recognized instead of trying to do it the way we've always done it, we should have themed sections of books. And so the themes are right there. There's one about germs or being sick. There's another theme about your feelings. And there's a third theme about strategies specific to being sick or specific to COVID-19. And I started with my my couple of titles, and then a few books had been released at the time. When I started digging deeper, I found that there were probably, at that time, I want to say maybe 21 or 23 titles that were available for free as downloads. When I reviewed them, some were not great. That's okay. Some were not great, and I still included because of diversity. But others, there was one that was downright racist and completely offensive in multiple ways. I stammer even thinking about that book. I won't share it with you unless you send me a DM, and then I will tell you which one it is, so you don't download it or share it. But we wound up with 17 free options, which was really what I was excited about, because those are things that, let's say you're only distributing the link of this kit to your parents, they can look at this on a phone. They can look at it on a computer or a tablet. They can print it on their home printer if they need to. The last tab there, we talked in the kit about how do I find these books? If my library is closed, if I'm uncomfortable ordering things from strangers on eBay or on Amazon, how do I actually get these books? And we turn them to their libraries. And one of the things we were saying was potentially they can print it for you. Potentially they can find this book as an ebook and download it and add it to their collection so that you can use your library card and access it for free. But again, making sure that people recognize that turning to their librarians for information is a good thing to do. So that was also a twist. Instead of people borrowing it from the libraries, having to say like, oh, don't forget to go to your library. All right, the changes to the activities guide. Oh, how do you do your activities with materials if you're not lending them and getting them back? So we wrote some activities that have no materials. So one example is a mindfulness minute where we talk people through a breathing exercise they can do with their children to focus on feelings, to recenter themselves. And all you need for that is a space and your child, and preferably no screens. Common materials. So others, I'm probably going to talk about the collage section that we did a lot. We included, I want to say, three different types of collage experiences that families could engage in. And so some of them, it would say like, what can I use to do this? So you could just use, scrap papers or construction paper or scrapbooking paper or stickers, but also don't forget, you get junk mail probably every day. You can use those materials to collage. There are things that you don't play with anymore or books that got destroyed that you can use those materials to collage with. If you don't even have books or mail, if you can go outside to a park, you can pull grass and you can use flowers and you can use bark and seeds and just things you find in nature. If you don't live near nature, you can use rocks. You can use like the little gravel from the sidewalk. You can always utilize materials, found art materials in what we're creating here. Some were virtual experiences, and I'll get to that in a second. I'll get to it right now. The more section. This was something that I don't normally do in these kits. I don't feel like giving parents homework, but because so many brilliant things were being created to assist with COVID, whether it was free, oh my gosh. So somebody, if there's a dancer in the crowd, you can help me. It's in the kit. This brilliant multiracial dance company was offering free dance lessons and free recordings at the time. And I forget his name. He's so famous. He's in New York City. That helps. I'm sure that helps, right?
Who isn't?
But even things like the Tennessee Aquarium down the street here in Chattanooga, they were putting out like a weekly resource kit that was fabulous with printable sheets and worksheets for parents to give to their kids that were either, you know, coloring or word searches or find the missing sea creature. They were hosting all of their IMAX movies for free online. They had webcams set up of the animals that were all free, and they were doing their own programming. So you could have FaceTime with an aquarium worker and ask your questions. And it was just so well done. So I had to go virtual with some of these things because it was available. And that's the more section.
Was the New York dancer Alvin Ailey?
Yes, Ailey, thank you. Who said that?
Amy.
Amy, get out of my brain. Get out of my brain and into my laundry box. Yeah, Alvin Ailey, holy cow. And so for me, like the more thing, like again, diversity, right? So how do I find, you know, not every kid's gonna want to watch an opera, and not every kid's a freaking ballerina. So I was just so excited that Ailey was doing that, and
Well, and I think that's great that you mentioned that, Megan, because this is also an opportunity to look and develop some relationships with community partners that you maybe hadn't reached out to before. So I was scrolling through the gram, as I do way more than I should, and went across a friend who lives in Middletown who recorded their child doing this like dance in front of their computer, and it was either recording or live of what do they call it? Like Oddfellows Playhouse in Middletown. And so they were doing a recording, and I don't know if it was like dance or workout or whatever, but this kid was feeling it. And that's a community connection that maybe that library didn't initially have, or maybe they did, and they expanded upon it and sort of solidified that relationship, which will hopefully continue post-COVID.
Yes.
So it's an opportunity for us as librarians to really dig deep into our community. And for some of us, it might be easy. If you're in New Haven, you've got, you know, like 19 museums. But for some of our more rural communities, are any of our farms doing anything? Are they willing to, you know, record themselves milking cows or something and sort of giving information about their farm life? So there's more opportunity, I think, than we realize. It just might take a little bit of time to work out the kinks.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Changing our acts of kindness wasn't a huge stretch, but we had to encourage a socially distant focus. I have a tendency of saying that this was the first kit that ever felt political. And I think for us, we recognize that science is not political. Kindness is not political. Diversity, inclusion, social justice, these aren't political ideas, they're humanity ideas. But for sure, there are people who, anybody can download this kit and use it. And there were maybe some ideas edging on political, but we never addressed it that way. So you don't have to worry about this being what's the word? Like a conservative kit or a liberal kit. It is just a kit. Like the ideas are just in there. But so one of the things that was so popular that we really liked the idea of was the thank you baskets for delivery workers. But how do you do that responsibly? And like, it's great to have the idea, but if you're just going to leave like an open bag of Doritos out there for anybody to put their hand in, like that's not doing any favors. So focusing on encouraging people to participate in some of these activities they've heard of in responsible ways. We also mentioned some really library stuff like creating a story walk for your neighborhood. Yeah, I know. But just, I like to mention that some of where this kit goes could be perceived as political. I always recommend that people read these things before they share them, but I don't think that the people in this e-room will view it that way, but just to be prepared in case your anti-mask people are like, it said I should, blah, blah, blah. The one difference I had to, Amy, the one difference I had to create in the community helpers section was actually citing resources. So if I'm ever using a book like in the discussion guide where we're talking about grief, I'll cite, and now I'm not going to remember it because of, I'm gonna give this one to COVID brain, not baby brain, but the original study about the 5 stages of grief. So I'll cite that so that if parents want to dig deeper, they can. Generally in community helpers, I wouldn't have to do that. I would mention that they have websites, but because this is an online world we're living in, I actually felt the need to cite some sources for some of these things, especially when it came to churches and religious leaders and the kind of services that they were offering at the time. Okay, so that's the COVID kit. And I know that what we just went through, was a ton of information, especially if you haven't ever peeked at the project before. Does anybody have a question about anything Healing Library? Could be the COVID kit, could be the other stuff we already discussed. I'm going to give you a second and take a big gulp of water.
You deserve it. It's like you never realize how little talking you do until you talk a lot nonstop and you're like, why does my throat hurt? I need a cough drop. Do I have COVID? No, I've just been talking for 4 hours.
I told Felix is my son, and we sang a lot this morning. I was like, it's good warm up. It's good warm up. But the last 2 physical conferences I went to, no, I didn't lose my voice at PLA, but at Midwinter last year, or was it annual last year? I can't remember. We had just released the Separation and Divorce Kit, and Barefoot Books highlighted that book at the Book Buzz stage. So we gave a little presentation, and then we were all back in the booth so that people could paw. Again, I love people to paw through the kits and like handle the materials. And I totally lost my voice after that because I had just talked to my infant for, 7 months or whatever it was.
Listen,
at that point.
I worked on the bookmobile in Ferguson, where Amy is, and it was great. But what happens is like you never actually stop. Like your only stopping is driving from one preschool to another preschool. I think I'd had that job for a week and a half before my voice was just gone. It was just gone. I was like, well, I've never done this nonstop, like an hour at one spot, 10 minutes, an hour, 10 minutes, an hour. And you just like, then it's gone. It's over.
When I went from my tiny library in Vermont to it all depends on where you live, right? Like in Connecticut, it'd probably be considered a small to maybe a mid-sized library, the Lewiston one. Every October, I lost my voice when back to school started, and we would start up like that after, 3 to 7 p.m. every night, just nonstop talking and homework help and all that. Every year, I lost my voice for like 5 days. Okay, were there any questions in the chat? I don't see any.
Nope. Yeah, I'm looking. But Carol did share 5 Stages of Grief by Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
Yes, Kubler-Ross. Thank you. You guys. You're on it. It's always really cool to give one of these presentations because people seem to get excited because we're librarians, like we're helpers by nature, right? And we care about people by nature. But I love this room in particular because it's like you guys are nerdy about the same things I'm nerdy about. Okay, I'm going to jump into social emotional learning before I start crying and having a moment. So I mentioned that I would talk about this, and here we go. The purpose of the kits. So there are things that these kits do, and there are things that these kits do not do and will never do. So what the kits do, and this is one.
Can we pause for 1 second, Megan? So we have a question from Johanna. What have you found are the most helpful ways to promote these to families?
Oh, well, Joanna, thanks for the segue because we're actually going to get to that in a little bit.
Oh, perfect. I wasn't sure if we were like veering off of it, but you're probably right. The purpose of kits fits beautifully with that question.
So a little bit later, we'll talk more about that, Joanna, but do you have I just want to dig deeper for just a second in case I can offer something that'll make this next part more meaningful to you. Do you mean because of our COVID world, or do you mean sort of like, and I know that's not fair, right? Like it's all post-COVID now, but I get, okay.
Immediately beginning of COVID. Because I mean, like worst case scenario, we're at this for the next year. So we're all still kind of adjusting or, do you have a smaller library? Do you struggle to reach families like COVID or no COVID?
Yes. So that's sort of where I was going with this, because these are what I found from the libraries that have been in contact with me is that they don't have a hard time lending these materials at all. If anything, so a great example of this is Napa County in California. They downloaded the kits for free and they actually reshaped a couple of them, which I loved. They broke out the death of a loved one kit to be the death of a parent, the death of a grandparent. And it might even be like the death of a grandmother and a grandfather, the death of a mother or a father. I can't specifically remember at the moment. But what they found, a little brief history about them, and I was going to share this later. So again, I may stop myself. I may keep going. We'll see. But Jennifer, who was the head of the project, she said that in the I want to say the 2 years leading up to them releasing their kits, they experienced an earthquake, which was the worst that had ever happened in their area ever. In California, the worst earthquake ever for them. So that had a traumatic impact upon the community as a whole. Following that, there were the wildfires, which a lot of us saw, you know, like Rob Lowe helping. This is the image that sticks out for me. It's like Rob Lowe helping the firefighters and cooking the burgers shirtless or whatever that was. That was a moment. But that actually, there were some super serious effects on their community, especially since they hadn't even recovered from the earthquake yet. And we tend to think of Napa as being a very rich area, which is not the case. That's our perception, right? Again, because of entertainment. So Jennifer reached out to me when they started lending the kits, and she was like, hey, I just wanted to tell you thank you, and we really love this. And they had a piece in their local paper that I think I stumbled upon, and I was like, this is amazing. So fast forward a little bit, and I'm still talking to Jennifer, and we're like Facebook friends now. I love her. So she reached out to me and she said, I have to tell you something. It was really awful. They had, I want to say it was more than 2, like maybe it was at least 2, but it might've been 3, either kindergartners or preschoolers who passed away. Oh. And she wrote to me and she said, the kits are going out so much now because of the fires and the earthquakes that we've actually purchased more of the books that we just keep on our shelves. And what we're doing is we're printing the materials for families who come in asking for them because they're out all the time. So we're printing the materials and pointing them towards the actual books so they can check them out and have these experiences just without the art materials. And I'm not saying like, oh, what I made is so great that everybody wants it all the time. But what I am saying is that if you think there's a need in your community, it's probably bigger than you think. And what I have found from people is that the materials aren't hard to get people to borrow. And what I would say in a post-COVID world, and I think we'll talk about this later. I think I have some stuff up about this. But as Kim mentioned, partnerships. So are there shelters who would benefit from a librarian e-presenting, or even coming and socially distant presenting an activity with their residents? Are there, I'm gonna have to get a box of tissues at the break. You guys are making me break down. Are there, beyond story times, if you were to offer something like this and maybe create a video of you doing one of the activities in the kit, for example, could you post that in your own card catalog so that as folks are searching for mother death keywords, a video of you popping up and sharing the materials, or a link to the downloadable free stuff in your own catalog is something that's possible too. And I have a couple of pages pulled up to share later with examples of how this looks in other folks' catalogs, just for you. But does that help? Does that answer your question?
And feel free to verbalize, Johanna.
Yeah.
She said, yes, thank you in the chat. Okay, awesome.
Great, okay.
Take your minute, drink a second. The thing is, I think, Megan, with the work that you're doing and the things that we're sort of tiptoeing into is that librarians are a group of people who generally care. Like, that's why we're all trying to do curbside before maybe it's like safe to do it, you know, like that's why we're like, but the kids need us. So I think that this is, this work that you have stepped into that we're all lucky enough to benefit from is more than just the traditional work. There is a lot of emotion that's tied into this. So like, by all means, take 2 or 3 sips.
I took I had a job. I briefly left libraries when I turned 30. I know. And I took a job.
What did 30 do to you?
Oh, I was an idiot when I was 30. I bought a house and then I joined AmeriCorps.
Oh,
it's like the dumbest thing. And the mortgage was on me and the insurance and everything. Luckily, it was a vandalized HUD home that like was missing doors, so I could afford it. Anyway, I took this job working for the Vista. It was AmeriCorps Vista. I took this job working for the United Way of Greater Portland and the Maine Commission for Community Service. educating people in volunteer management, which is my other passion. And my boss at one point, I had to go to these things about like, there's a great librarian who is a part of this group, but what community organizations can be like, if there's a tsunami in Maine, if there's a massive hurricane or earthquake, like where do we set up these mobile locations to be hospitals if there is no hospital, and sort of respond trauma and community-wide trauma response teams. And my boss at the time was like, go to these, like go ahead, but you don't want to become the trauma lady. And I remember at the time I was like, oh, I don't want to become the trauma lady. And now I've totally become the trauma lady. And so going to conferences and presenting on this, it used to be people would come up and talk to me about like David Bowie afterwards. And now people want to come and share their stories of loss and grief, and I just sort of absorb them. And but it's been really good as far as, you know, learning boundaries and meditations, and like I won't call it compartmentalization, but I only bring this up because it still does catch me off guard sometimes, because I never used to be the trauma lady. I was a teen librarian. I was just a, you know, like the yoga story time lady. And it's okay to give yourselves a minute. And if you do have a story you want to share, you can send it to me privately or an email, or you can just pipe up too and have a little cry if you need to, because this stuff gets heavy. We're here for you. So back to this. What the kits do, they supply your families with an introduction to healing. This isn't a be all end all. An introduction to healing through a plan that's going to be of their own design. We do that through meaningful, constructive discussions. We do it through the sharing of stories and empathy. We do it through participating in these art and play-based holistic therapy activities. And we give that to them through encouraging families to continue this journey within their communities after they're done engaging with the kit or your library or your personal service too. In addition, they allow your library to invest in the wellness of your community. Now, what they don't do is they don't take the place of a therapist or a counselor or a doctor. They don't guarantee a fix. There is no fixing what has happened. There's only growing. And they won't turn you into a therapist. So don't expect that your families are going to borrow this kit and then come back to you and, you know, where's my chaise lounge? I have to unload on you now. There, like I said, there may be some of that, but I'll share an example later that I think will resonate with people, but these don't have to be scary. And it's not, I don't really think of this as falling into the category of scope creep, because it's supplementing the community resources that are there for these people. Again, you're just the librarian. I have a tendency to say that librarians are conduits to the universe, and that's all this is. It's one more plug that you're plugging people into the correct people they should be talking to, or experiences that they should be looking for moving forward. So we're gonna have another poll, because I'm a little curious. I know that this is in schools a lot these days, so I'm wondering who is familiar with social learning. You might be familiar, you might not be familiar, you might be like, I think I've heard of this, or maybe I read an article a couple of years ago, but I don't know. Or maybe you just realized that you were supposed to be in that other workshop that's taking place for school librarians in the state of Connecticut today. But probably you've bounced by now because of the heaviness and the tears and the...
No.
Cool, I'm seeing a lot of folks are familiar. A little bit of unsure. Less folks are not familiar. This is great. Okay. Oop, people are still chiming in. Okay, it looks like that's it. So I'm gonna share this with everybody. Okay, the majority of people are familiar. Yeah, 53% of folks are familiar. Only 13% are unfamiliar, and I got my sortas. So it's great that so many people know about this already. As we move forward, if you feel like interjecting an idea or answering someone's question, that's good. And we're gonna do some breakout work. So it'll be really helpful for you guys to talk to your people that are feeling more iffy about their ideas. Oh, this is cool. I love this group. Oh, and if you've never heard of it, not familiar, my smallest percentage, buckle up. This is gonna be a wild ride. You're gonna love this. It's so in line with what we do. Okay. Whoop, too far. So there's this organization called CASEL. It stands for the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And that's their website right there, casel.org. They are the sort of like thought founders of the idea of social emotional learning and that phrasing. And they support social emotional learning, or SEL. I might bounce back and forth because the acronym is so easy to say. They support it through research. So it's not just their research too. They always put collaboration at the bottom, but what I think is interesting is that they collaborate with a multitude of organizations to put all these things together. So it's not just them doing their own independent research. They actually work with a lot of organizations or bring in things like Pew Research studies, and we'll show you some others. So there's a lot of research that gets done about the topic. They assist in the practice, and what this means is CASEL specifically focused on this starting in the classroom. And so how do teachers assist their students with social emotional learning in a multitude of ways, and having a plan in place so that they can really have this be a practice. And then policy, this is really interesting. So they help at both a local, which is like statewide, and a federal level with policy creation. And what's super cool is they have this thing, if you go to their website and you click on policy, check out State Scan, because it's a really cool way to just sort of click on your own state and see what policies are already in place, because then you're educated so that when you are looking for those partners moving forward, which we'll talk about eventually, you can, you know, have that little printout and say, so I know that the state of Connecticut is already doing this or that, and I know that on a federal level we've had these passed. How can we assist you in those efforts? Or what do you think you can bring to our library patrons to create, well, we'll get to the rings and everything, but to create the ripple effect that CASEL is really looking for. And then finally, they deal a lot in collaboration. So I'm gonna read this one again, just because it is important. If anybody's glitching, I want you to hear this. So they define social emotional learning as the process through which children and adults, for my people that had over the age of 18, this is important, acquire and effectively apply the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. That sort of sounds like all of our mission statements expanded, doesn't it? Just adding lifelong learning in there too. So the way that CASEL represents this is this beautiful diagram that's up on the screen now, and there's the link to that exact diagram if you are looking for it later. So just focusing on, so SEL is in the very center, and around that you'll see 2 orange areas, 2 green areas, and 1 yellow area. And I don't know why they colored them that way, I always forget. But these are the 5 basic competencies that they have broken the idea of social emotional learning into. Each of these have subsections, which we'll get to later. But those are self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Now, beyond this, you see these 3 rings, and that's sort of the ripple effect that I was talking about when we think of collaboration in the previous couple screens. So again, they really focus on this, starting with a teacher, starting in the classroom. But beyond that, their hope is that a focus on social emotional learning will be a school-wide practice. Now, because this is school focused, that next layer of homes and communities, you can, like, that has to do with school districts, but also I love at the bottom of the ring, you'll notice, it also says families and community partnerships. So beyond the school stuff, there's a little bit of parenting material that's available on their website, but not a ton. But really, this is where we fit in, the community partnerships piece. And again, this is work that I think you're going to recognize you're already doing. And so you've been supporting without even knowing it. But we're sort of in that pale blue outer tier if you're looking at this diagram. So this part's a lot of reading, but I am going to read them because it's important. Okay, so their definitions, not mine. They define self-management as the ability to successfully regulate one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors in different situations, to effectively managing stress, controlling impulses, and motivating oneself, the ability to set and work toward personal and academic goals. And they break that into these 6 subcategories: impulse control, stress management, self-discipline, self-motivation, goal setting, and organizational skills. The next competency is self-awareness, and they define it as the ability to accurately recognize one's own emotions, thoughts, and values, and how they influence behavior. The ability to accurately assess one's strengths and limitations with a well-grounded sense of confidence, optimism, and a growth mindset. I love this one. So they break it into 5 subcategories here of identifying your emotions, accurate self-perception, recognition of your strengths, self-confidence, and self-efficacy. The third is social awareness, which they define as the ability to take the perspective of and empathize with others, including those from diverse backgrounds and cultures. The ability to understand social and ethical norms for behavior, and to recognize family, school, and community resources and supports. That's a big librarian one. They have 4 subcategories for that: perspective taking, empathy, appreciating diversity, and respect for others. The fourth is relationship skills, which is the ability to establish and maintain healthy and rewarding relationships with diverse individuals and groups. The ability to communicate clearly, listen well, cooperate with others, resist inappropriate social pressure, negotiate conflict constructively, and seek and offer help when needed. The 4 subcategories for this fall into communication, social engagement, relationship building, and teamwork. And finally, responsible decision-making. The ability to make constructive choices about personal behavior and social interactions based on ethical standards, safety concerns, and social norms. The realistic evaluation of consequences of various actions and a consideration of the well-being of oneself and others. And all my teen librarians that are in the room right now are like, So they break this one into 6 subcategories: identifying problems, analyzing situations, solving problems, evaluating, reflecting, and ethical responsibility. So that was a lot. We're going to do an activity because I've been talking forever and I'm really lonely and I want to hear from you guys. So I'm going to explain the activity and give some examples, and then we're going to do an activity together. So what we're going to do is a brainstorming session. And Kim and I were really excited about this yesterday. So we might nerd out kind of hard and just tolerate us. I want to hear your ideas, because probably as we were going through that, either, I know for some people it's reading the definition, for other people it's hearing someone else say the definition, and for a third group of people it's reading those bulleted points. And that's part of why it's so annoying, but I read them because you kind of, you know, online you got to reach everybody, all these different types of learners. So probably as we were going through some of that, you were like, oh, I do that really well, I've got a good one. And I want to hear those really good ideas. So what we're going to do is we're going to share those ideas in a moment. Not yet. I'll say go, and then you'll know it's real. You can type them into chat, or if you feel like, I don't know quite how to verbalize this or which one it sounds quite like, but I know it's one of these, you can raise a hand and I will turn you on so that you can talk to just me. If you already know your idea, you can type it into the chat box and Kimberly is gonna put it up on the whiteboard. It's gonna take a second for us to get started because I'm gonna have to write all 5 competencies above so we know where to put them. As you're thinking about this, it could be for any type of program. If you're thinking story times, because a lot of these are pretty easy to think about in story time terms, if you're one of those people, if it's a Lego club, if it's your teen advisory board, if it's programming for your local book groups, for my adult people that are out there, really anything works. And I'm going to share an example of each just to sort of show you how you can verbalize these.
Mm-hmm. And while Megan was reading those definitions, I put a link in the chat to the webpage that had all of the competencies listed, as well as the definitions that Megan was reading. So if you want to sort of go back and take a closer look at them, you know, if something kind of slipped by you, just click the link in the chat and then you'll go right to where she pulled that information from.
Perfect. Thank you, Kim.
To sort of ground you. No problem.
So,
yeah, I am your co-pilot. I think I'm a great, I can throw a couple links.
Anytime.
Absolutely. It'll be all show tunes all the time.
So just as an example, under self-management, I chose organizational skills to share an example with. So one example is singing the cleanup song at the end of a toddler play group. So yeah, they'll probably also be cleaning, but even just singing that song is reinforcing in children the idea of organization. This is a time where things get put away, things have a place they go. In terms of self-awareness, identifying emotions is a pretty easy one to get started with. But one of the CASEL things that got me thinking about this is this example. So using more identifying language than just, you seem mad, or are you mad, when one of your storytime kids gets upset about sharing. Instead, you can say something like, you're showing me you're angry with your body and your words. Do you feel angry? So that's letting them recognize that speech is communication, but also our bodies can communicate. And the communication that you're sending out is the emotion of anger. And do I see and hear that properly? And giving the child an opportunity to reflect, or you may see shoulders go up or down with this kind of a statement. So you're recognizing in the child that they're already relaxing, even if they're like, no, but they go down, you're like, okay, you're feeling better already. So that's one example. In social awareness, appreciating diversity. And I did this one because I know so many children's people are like, I use a bunch of different books. They feature characters of a multitude of races, abilities, sexes, lifestyles, and experiences in my story times. So I took that one just so 1,000 people don't share it in the chat box for poor Kim. And when it comes to relationship skills, I chose the idea of teamwork. So creating projects for your TAB that engage multiple members, regardless of the time they've had in that group or their political standing. And when I say political standing, I just mean like, I'm the president of TAB. I always choose what we do next. Or I've been the secretary of TAB for 3 years, so I always get to be on the flamingo flocking committee, or whatever it is. So instead, you assigning tasks to people and encouraging diverse representation in that group. Under responsible decision-making, I chose reflecting. And so I like this. So asking your parents in a baby group if they've been singing any of the songs you guys share when they're at home. Listen to their stories. It gives them the chance to do this reflecting. Once you've sort of heard their stories, reminding them, oh, that's so great. You know, when babies seem stressed, singing soothes them both with the voice of their parent in a sing-songy, playful way, but also it's triggering a memory, even in tiny, tiny babies, of happy times or engaging times. And then you're even able to tie it back to the library being a happy, engaging place. So it's an opportunity for reflection. Okay, so before we jump in and before I say the GO word, I'm just going to review this once again. And if you have a question about what we're going to do, just share it with Kim. We're going to do a little juggling between screens and stuff to make this happen, so it might feel just a teensy bit clunky. But I want to hear your ideas about the ways that you can support SEL in your own services through these 5 components, specifically programming. You can type your idea into the chat, or if you need to verbalize, you can raise your hand and I will talk with you to figure out how to make this come out in English, I always say. It could be for any type of program. And if you see one, as this is going on in the whiteboard screen, you'll actually see there's a little area called stamps. And if you see an idea that you like or that you do too, go ahead and put a heart next to it, just so we can give each other some love. Does this make sense to people? I'm going to switch screens before I say the GO word.
You go ahead and switch screens. I'll keep an eye on the chat. Megan and a few other consultants at the Service Center and I had a ball playing around in Zoom and discovered some fun uses for the whiteboard feature, because sometimes despite, actually you might want to just unshare, Megan, and then reshare and click whiteboard. Okay. That's probably going to be what's easiest for you. But we know that sometimes no matter how interested you are in a topic, it's just hard. Like, it's just hard to stay engaged. So you can go ahead, if you hit like share screen, that's when you'll see the whiteboard again.
Oh, right. Thanks. Yep. I was like, I'm looking.
No, go ahead. So this is just, just a little something different so that we can kind of have a different view. And
yeah. And one of the things I really miss about in-person workshops is like everybody in the room is as good a resource as anybody who's like a talking head for a moment in your life, So we should be sharing our ideas. And I know that what you have is valuable. So let's give you a chance to really highlight that good work and spark some ideas in one another. Okay, so I'm going to add some text boxes here.
And if you guys want to start typing things into the chat, what your examples are and which competency you think they fall under, go right on ahead and do that. You can type it right into the chat, and then I'm going to transpose it onto the whiteboard. That way we can kind of see how things sort of mesh. And again, like Megan said, I get that. I do this all the time where I'm like, what are the words? What are the words I'm trying to say? I don't know, but here are all the words that I'm not trying to say. Maybe you can help me get to where I need to be, and feel free to unmute and do that. And then Megan will kind of help you get there. And again, this is a pretty small group. This is not like the biggest Zoom that there's ever been. So if you don't want to raise your hand or you can't quite find that blue hand, just say some words, say some things. I know we're all doing this. Yeah. Actually, even regardless of the blue hands, just piping up on your mic is probably the fastest and easiest way. And since there aren't a ton of us, we can just, we're good at this. We can take turns. And we actually have a request saying, can you give a few more examples for older kids and teens? Oh, and just another reminder that I did put the CASEL link in because it might be helpful to some of you to have the webpage pulled up, where you can see some of the, like the breakdowns of what these different competencies mean. So I had a teen when I was working in the teen department at Chattanooga who had anger issues, and she kept getting kicked out of school for physically fighting with other girls who would instigate with her. And she couldn't find the impulse control. So impulse control is one of those under self-management. And so one of the things I talked to her about was like, all right, so when I'm angry and I was going through some rough, like a lot of death in my world at that time that was leaving me feeling pretty furious. I was like, so in me, anger feels like heat. Like it starts in my gut or in my ribs and it just grows throughout my body. And I know when my arms and my face feel hot that it's too far and I have to do something. And so I shared, I think it was my Bella Beat that I had at the time, which is like just for ladies fitness tracker. There were meditations built in, and one of those was ocean sounds. So I opened a laptop and I was like, so I'm from an island off the coast of Maine. Like the sea just works for me. And so I would play her these underwater sounds. And at first she was sort of like, and if you're a teen person, like she was like, that's bullshit. And I was like, maybe, but are you willing to like try it? And she was like, yeah, okay. And so I put it on and I was like, I'm going to leave you. And I just want you to listen to this for like 30, 60 seconds and tell me what you think. And so I popped back in later and she was like, yeah, it was pretty nice. And so we talked about recognizing emotion in yourself. But then I was like, so in those moments, it's going to take practice. That's why it's called a mindfulness or meditation practice. You have to work at it, but try, thinking of the ocean and seeing if that helps you calm down. And, there were plenty of times I would give advice like that to teenagers and it didn't work. That's just the work that we're all involved in. But in this particular case, it did. And she would come to me, I feel like it was 3 or 4 times in the following months. And she was like, guess who didn't get in a fight today? I was like, yeah. So that's one teen example. Goal setting is another really good teen example. I know, what was it, like 2 years ago? Bullet journals were so popular. And that can be a really great goal setting tool to use. And it was something that at the time teenagers were like, willing to do with you. Does that help? Do you want any more? And again, those of you who have microphones, you can toss things out, take a look at the link, and draw some examples from there. And I've got my eyes in the chat and I am ready to type. And if any of you are focused on new adults too, not even teenagers, but I started working in the 4th floor of the Chattanooga Public Library because I was like, my teenagers are like leaving me. And then, a lot of us seem to have this gap,
right? Where new adults, we don't have a lot of programming for them, or we don't have a lot of well-attended programming. And it's sort of like we forget about them until they become parents or voters a couple times every year or every couple of years. And there's so much more to them than that. So one of under relationship skills, there's one of those subsections is social engagement. And so I started doing these maker programming things out in the city at different places. And so I would go to like an urban gardening center and we would make herb pasta from the herbs that were out on this patio slab on the plants. Or I would go to a local tea shop and I would set up and we'd bring the sewing machine and I would teach how to make reusable tea bags. And so it was an opportunity for us to go out into the community and to tell our kids like, hey, we're going to be at Wildflower Tea on Saturday if you want to come and hang out and make a tea bag. And they're going to have like tea deals for the people that are doing stuff with us. And so they got to go to a new spot in the city that they hadn't seen before potentially and meet other people that had similar interests.
Now, Amy suggested the you get what you get and you don't get upset. Now, I sort of had typed that into responsible decision making because like the decision is yours. Like you get upset, you don't get upset, you get what you get. Yeah. Is that where you would suggest putting that, Megan? So. She's self-discipline, right?
Yeah.
I put it under self-management, but either one, honestly, everyone. But it's that concept where I want pink and trying to explain that, it's just borrowing. It doesn't have to match your bedspread.
Those daggone scarves, the sticks, dear God.
Eggs. I know. The shakers.
Yes. Ruiners of lives.
Their little hearts.
Yeah, these are good. I taught, even though my son is, not really, he calls me the word he uses for bubble, which I think is kind of great. But he doesn't even say like mama yet is my point. But we will talk about in the evening when I'm cooking dinner and Dad's on quarantine right now. So I'm alone with him at like the most stressful time of both of our days. And we're both getting tired and I'll be like, no more llama drama. And he knows like, oh, right. This is like, it may not stop him, but he recognizes like that's an overreaction, right? So that's identifying an emotion in yourself. But I totally get what you mean.
I'm going to ask you, Lynn, I really love your idea of with the older kids sharing TED Talks and things like that. And I wonder if you wanted to, like what what competency do you think that would fall under? Do you think that's kind of like, or how have you used that or how do you plan to use that? Where do you think we should toss that?
It's not older teens, it's senior citizens.
Oh, beautiful. Okay.
Old people. Oh, excuse me. Is that politically incorrect?
No. I'm just excited. I'm excited.
Beautifully aged.
So say it again, Lynn.
I have a group that talks about, in the January through April, we do something out of the Foreign Policy Association, which talks about current events. It's called Great Decisions.
Cool.
And that has sort of segued into every Monday we meet and talk about something. And because of current events, we have we've been, finding, well, what about the Confederate monuments? Why are these important? Well, they weren't built in 1866. They were built in 1970. And so this is why.
By the wives of Klan members. Come on.
And
Lord.
The thing is I'm in a rural community. 99.5% of my population is white.
Yep.
And so for me, this is important to help people figure out that, well, it's not a museum piece if it was built in 1970, and this is something that was just. And I think some of my people who are in the group are a little more aware than others. We've been having some great talks, and it's been wonderful to see some of the awareness being raised about why this is an important time right now.
So I hear a couple of potential areas that you're addressing. Mm-hmm. One is under relationship. I keep saying relationship skills. Clearly I need to get out more.
We're with you.
Communication, right? Mm-hmm. So a group of people getting together to actually talk about, I mean, it seems like civil topics, but it's very
Anything
personal.
from human trafficking to
Yeah.
importance of monuments to World War II history. It's a good group of people.
Yeah, and that's also, there's a ton. You may have hit every one of the subcategories under social awareness: perspective taking, empathy, appreciating diversity, especially if you're in a majority white community. You know, it's easy to live in your bubble and think that that's reality. And then respect for others. So whether it's the people in the group who have a differing opinion, or building that empathy piece and respecting, you know, the Black Lives Matter protesters that are engaging in really important work right now, and recognizing that what they're doing is not anti-government, it's reshape government.
Mm-hmm.
So perspective taking in that sense. That's really, really great, Lynn. Do you have it's so hard to say, like, can you put that into a bullet and we can put it somewhere? Or did any of that particularly resonate with you as a bulletable thing?
Yeah, I don't know. Kimberly, help!
Oh, I'm like reading other things. I'm like, what's a Socrates Cafe? A bullet point for how to use TED Talks. Is that what I just wrote TED Talks.
Yeah, raising awareness, current events. I don't know.
And that's what it is, especially because some of that work, I'm working on a presentation right now on diversity audits. That's coming Connecticut. And there's like one TED Talk in particular that I keep taking like chunks of it and embedding it into different parts of the presentation, because sometimes you just have to hear these things. Like sometimes just sort of like the stories that are shared, the way they're shared, the inflections, the jokes that are kind of dropped in are going to do a whole lot more than like bullet points. So, I mean, I think we all get what you're saying. I don't have like a very good bullet point at all. But
yeah, I kind of put group discussions and civics.
There you go.
And not to get too off topic here, but I didn't mention this in the beginning because you never know if it's going to come up or not, but I've been one of Library Journal Magazine's coaches for the Equity in Action and Diverse Collections, or Diverse Offerings, maybe.
That class, I think it was collections. At least it was a couple months ago when I took it.
Yes, so I've been one of their coaches for both of those courses for the last, I was telling Kim, I was like, I don't know, 3-4 years? How long have they been going on? I think 3 years, those courses. Before that, we were talking a lot about maker spaces and libraries. But what's been fascinating about that, I mean, the speakers are incredible, and I'm not, I don't work for Library Journal. I'm not here to say do it or not. But what's been really interesting for me as a librarian is talking other librarians through recognizing their privilege and through unpacking some of these ideas about diversity in our spaces and how to apply that well. And that's part of why I'm taking the audit focus today, is because I've been helping so many people through audits of diversity for so long. I was like, we should be doing a social emotional learning audit, because we're all doing it just in different ways. And if we can highlight that somehow, and maybe even more importantly, communicate it to our communities and our funding sources, how powerful. So thank you, Lynn, for that awesome program. It sounds difficult and needed.
And we've got another one where Yvonne did or does Socrates Cafe, which I had never heard of, and now I feel like a goober, which sounds fantastic, where a group picks a discussion such as race, or I'm sure like some things with like gender identity, things like that is what it seems like. And there's a facilitator to help keep the conversation respectful and flowing and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so I just asked Yvonne where they think that fits. And I was thinking social awareness, but relationship skills and self-awareness. I love that. Okay, let's go ahead and toss that.
Yeah. So I'm going to challenge everybody. We don't have anything under mood meter. Tell me mood meter. Somebody explain this one to me.
The mood, well, you can go ahead and speak for yourself, but I was reading it in the chat and it sounds really cute.
Please tell me.
Not everyone had.
And my other job is in a preschool, and they work with, the district works with Mark Brackett's program, the mood meter, and it's like 4 different squares, all different colors that reflect different emotions, and they give the kids a lot of different words for different feelings instead of, like you said before, mad, sad, happy, scared.
Yeah.
They just, and our teachers tend to incorporate a ton of picture books. My particular teacher this year would read a book really, in an animated way and take a picture with her phone of a character, like really distinctly expressing an emotion. And then she would put our mood meter chart on the ground and kind of say, where do you think this book character fits? And the kids really took to it. And they would, sometimes I remember one time 2 kids had conflicts with each other, and then later on in the day, the offender, who was in the red, so he was pretty upset, he was staring at the chart and he said, before I was in the red and she was in the blue. And it was just, it's very fascinating. So, and I feel like it hits on a lot of different categories too.
That's huge self-awareness. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm already thinking about like how excited I am for maybe 16 slides from now. You guys are great at this already. Okay, I love these. So I just want to remind everybody, there is this little stamp thing and it's a heart. If you click on stamp and choose the heart, go ahead and put hearts next to the ideas that resonate with you or you think you could see yourself engaging in later. And then I also want to challenge you to, there's a star in there. And if you have a favorite, like I love all of these, of course, right? Like this is just my happy place. So I'm probably going to put a heart next to all of them because that's me and I'm very into expressing my emotion. But if you're not that kind of person, if you have one favorite, there's a star in there as well. And I would ask that you also put your star next to your favorite idea.
So, yep, I was just about to explain it. So Amy is asking, where is the stamps? So if you just sort of move your mouse, or if you're on a tablet, maybe tap your screen, up at the top, you should see in green, you are viewing Megan's screen. Yeah. And next to that, you'll see view options. If you click on view options, like a little box is going to drop down and you'll see annotate. When you click on annotate, a long arrow or a long thin box is going to pop up. You'll see mouse, text, draw, stamp. Stamp has a check mark above it. If you go ahead and hover over stamps, you'll see, or actually click on it, you'll see like an arrow, a star, a heart, a check mark. We are not using that X because that's mean, and a question mark. So go ahead. I see people have been figuring out the stars, but or the hearts. But yeah, if there is something that is just resonating with you in a way where you're thinking, I'm going to use this one day. It might have to wait until COVID is relatively past, but I'm going to use this one day. That's when you're going to want to click on that star and then just click next to whatever it is that you're feeling right now.
Look at this coming to life. I love it.
And I'm actually going to I'm going to take a screenshot of this and save it because I think it's really great.
Oh, I love this. And I just wanted to address whoever put mindfulness and breathing exercises under self-management. I love that you're doing that already. If that's something you're interested in, especially my person who had the teen question before, there is a brilliant librarian named Jessica Bratt, and it's spelled B-R-A-D-T. She has written some articles or maybe they were blog posts, but if you Google librarian Jessica, just like it sounds, B-R-A-D-T, Bratt, and mindfulness, she has done some crazy cool things with her teens. And they have, a couple years ago, she had it wasn't called Circle Time, but it was basically Circle Time where just her regulars, it wasn't a program. It was like, look, we're all here every day. We're all in high school. We're all frustrated. And then we come here and it carries over. So let's talk through some stuff. And she would have a circle with all these teens where they would do mindfulness exercises and breathing activities. And she saw a dramatic decrease in incidents between her teens and just was able to physically see these kids growing as mindful humans who were taking on responsibility of their emotions and the management of their emotions. So whoever wrote that, I think you'll probably be into her work if you don't already know it. But I love this. Thank you guys so much.
Did you say, what's her name? B-R-A-D-T?
I think it's B-R-A-D-T. And when we have our break, I can Google that too.
I'm Googling it now, so carry on.
She's great. And she actually just did this really cool interview about anti-racism as a librarian and she talks about the Sesame Street thing they did, but about how to take that practice further as a librarian. Really good stuff. She's super brilliant. So I'm gonna get out of this screen. Do you want to take your screenshot, or did you already?
I took it. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm gonna get out of here. We're gonna stop sharing this.
Yep, that's probably gonna be the easiest way. Stop sharing and then go in and reshare.
I love your ideas.
Weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of Zooms.
Okay. I'm gonna get my notes out of the way. Okay, so that was a lot. There was a lot of me talking. It was a lot of you thinking. It was a lot of us working through all this new stuff. So we're going to take a break in a second, but before we do, I just wanted to share this as well. I know she already, I know Kim already shared the CASEL link, but in addition, they've also written a book. If you're more of a learn through the book kind of person, they also wrote a book called The Handbook of Social and Emotional Learning, Research and Practice. Full disclosure, it's on my to-buy list, but I'm still kind of scared of buying things right now. So I haven't read it, but the sections that I've peeked at here and there look really good. And if this is your kind of nerdy stuff, you'll probably enjoy it as well. So let's take a minute and let's go get some fresh water or coffee. No mimosas yet.
When we do that, this is something that I learned, don't leave Zoom.
Right.
So for those of you who already have your screen turned off and your microphone muted, that's great. Just leave it like that. For those who don't, maybe just mute your screen or turn off your screen, mute your microphone, but don't leave Zoom because you may have troubles getting back in if it thinks that you quit and you don't want to come back. But I just wanted to say that. How long do we want to give, Megan?
Let's give 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's 11:49. So how about we come back at 11:05?
Great. Wait, 11:05, 11:49?
Wait, guys, I need to go make some more coffee. So 11:55. Come back tomorrow at 11:05.
Well, if it's 11:45, I've got 11:50. Right?
It's 11:50, and I type
55.
Guys,
Gotcha.
Ignore everything that I'm saying. I'm recording myself doing this. Isn't that great? They're
Well,
gonna fire
you know what?
me
I always tell
immediately.
people, I'm like, this is why I work with words. I don't like this. Yeah, it's like we said, this is not why you invited me here, right?
Yeah.
To math the clock. All right, I'm going to look up those couple things, make myself a fresh cup of tea, and I'll be right back.
And we'll see you in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
One of our representatives will be happy to help you. One moment, please. And just so you know, record this call. And your call will be answered in the order it was received. We are currently experiencing high call volume, resulting in hold time between 5 and 10 minutes. Are you waiting to listen to the latest?
Where are you going?
National.
Oh, Justin said you weren't able to come pick him up, so.
I'll go get him because I'm pretty late anyway. So that just pushes me back.
I just sent an email to my supervisor who's in New Hampshire. I didn't forward the library director or anybody else. I said I was taking some stuff, but.
If you wanted to get Dustin, you wanted to get Dustin.
You said you got it 12.
You said it gets up at 12.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Let's see.
You said 12.
Why don't you text him? It might be 12. I don't know. Because if it's 12, you gotta go get him now, right?
Right.
All right then.
Oh, how to interact with others by playing games. Oh, thank you, Kathy. I don't know if you're still listening, but thank you. And Megan, I don't know if you can see this, but Kathy said she was driving, so she dialed in. She was moving she started at home and then went to work, and said that contributed that kids and teens learn a lot about themselves and how to interact with each other by playing games. I've even used Little Mouse to encourage taking turns. So you were absolutely right.
Yeah, that's a great contribution. I'm so glad that she made it and she's like typing back in now. She's back with us.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, there was this game when I was in the bookmobile. Lord, you have to find ways to occupy these children. And one thing, it was I kind of made it up. I liked felt boards, like that was my thing. And there was some weather thing, and I was like, I don't want to do that. So I would just like sing as I was, you ever see the weather, and then like just like point at one, and they'd be like, rain. And when I tell you that like that was that, and I mean because I would tell us until everyone, we had to keep people from pulling books off, so we would wait until when there were carpet squares. I didn't care if they fidgeted a little bit. I didn't care if they were crisscross applesauce, but just stop pulling book. I understand that they're right by your head, but I can't rescue you because like you're 6 rows in. And I mean like the little things, the way you can take like very simple cheesy things and teach kids how to take turns, raise your hand if you want to shout the weather name. It was bonkers, but who knew? I mean, they would have me doing that for 40 minutes. And I was like, guys, like, don't you want to read any books? No.
I know. My kids in, oh shoot, I'm not finding the project. Oh wait, that was it. It's on the tip of my tongue and I just saw her picture. Welcoming library, that's what it's called. Okay. So my kids in Maine, we were in, so at the time, the big centers for refugees to come in the country were Minneapolis, Atlanta, Burlington, Vermont, and then Lewiston, where I was in Maine. And so we had a lot of kids from Africa, and I was, I could still only remember like 3 or 5 words in Somalian. But there was a kid who, I think the language was called Fulani, out of Africa. And he was really nervous, but he was like, how come you only learn Somali words? And I was like, what other words should I learn? Like, what do you want to teach me? And he's like, I don't want to teach you Fulani, but I don't know why you won't. I was like, I don't have anybody to teach me. I was like, how about we do this? And I started making cootie catchers, and we would play cootie catcher because he loved that game. And when it came to the part where you would flip it up, I was like, okay, I'll write a word instead of like number 7, I'll write the word for cow. And then you tell me the Fulani word and we'll put it underneath and we'll teach everybody Fulani this way.
Oh. Oh, how lovely.
But it's so true. Like what comes out of necessity are some of the best things.
Yep.
And it's really what comes out of relationships, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, I think I've got all the links that I was supposed to share with everybody.
Okay, and I believe we should all be back and ready to go.
Yay. Okay, so let's see. One at a time, Megan. Let me pull up, or where is it? Oh, because I'm screen sharing. Right, how do I get to the chat from here? Can I do that?
Yeah, I think it's at the top. Yep.
Yeah, there we go.
And Kelsey shared a bunch of links with us that I'm opening myself. Feelings and Dealings and Totem are great games, Kelsey has said to us. And Amy says Cootie Catchers are the best.
And The Rabbit Listened, such a good book. It's so funny. Right before COVID happened, my son and I had just started a story time or an activity out of the house a day. Because we've got like 4 or 5 branches now. Everybody did it on different days. So 4 days we would go to story times in the morning, and the 5th day we were going to go to the aquarium. And I had just started pawing through all the new like social emotional learning books that I had sort of mentally made a checklist of, and getting the lists ready together of what I was going to borrow. And then the world exploded. And The Rabbit Listened is one of the best books about empathy I've ever read, Trisha. So yes. I'm writing that down again though, because again, somebody said it again, like more and more. So what I'm going to do, guys, is I looked everything up. Oh, my tea's over there. I looked everything up during our break that I wanted to share with you. The first thing I wanted to share was Curious City, which was Kirsten Cappy's business that has all the great free resources. So here's a link to that. The second thing I want to share that I mentioned, where I was like, she's on the board or she was a founder or something, is, oh, this is Welcoming Library. Where is it? Diverse Book Finder. So what's cool about this is it's a group of librarians and educators and activists who have worked together to pre-assess titles that were probably already in your collections or you've heard of or are new and you just want to learn a little bit more about. And you can actually sift through them and see like, all right, here's a legit Own Voices title about a Cherokee youth. So I'll share that resource here. Diverse Book Finder and our team, and you'll see wherever Kristen fits in there. And then finally, the other project that Kirsten started after the Healing Library was this project called I'm Your Neighbor Books.
Megan,
and, yeah.
You're sending them just to me.
Oh no, I did it again. Okay, hold on.
Sorry, I just don't want people to miss out. That's all.
Okay, so hold on.
I'll copy these 2 and I'll send them to everybody. But just so the third one,
that should be to everyone, right? Okay. So I'm Your Neighbor Books is immigration stories and experiences shared. And there's actually a lending library, and I forget where you can get it in New England. I apologize if Connecticut isn't one of those places, but you can, again, view the titles and build your own. So those are all helpful.
To piggyback off of that, I just shared a link in the chat. We already have some of these resources listed on the diversity page of my Children and Young Adult LibGuides, as well as a bunch of others. So take a look at that. We have I'm Your Neighbor. We have Diverse Book Finder. We don't have the Curious City, but I will make sure to add that. So I sent a link to the LibGuides in there as well, so you can also take a look at other things.
Cool. And then my screen should be back up.
Yes,
and everything's shared. The slides are back. Okay, and it's loading and loading and loading. Okay, so we're going to dive right into the SEL assessment and audits this afternoon, but I don't want to talk so much. So we're going to do another activity. And this is really to just sort of warm you up for the big workbook that I mentioned. Again, if you haven't printed it yet and you have the chance to print it, you'll get the most out of it if you can print it and sort of scribble all over it. Kim, would you mind sharing that link once more?
Yes, absolutely.
Because I have something else queued up that I don't want to erase. It's a nice surprise for people. So this activity is to work in groups and have a chance to sort of like hash some ideas out and get creative together. So what we're going to do is divide you up into some Zoom rooms in a moment. Then we're going to have you choose a scenario that I've pre-written for you. I have 3 for you to choose from. Then we're going to end, and it's not all about kids, so you'll be happy, my adult people, and even my elderly or advanced people, advanced focused people. You're going to answer a few questions, and then one of your team members will report out to us at the end, because again, if we're not sharing what we're doing, are we really librarians? You're going to have 10 minutes to get this work done. So if you didn't get to pee or you didn't get to answer that one last email, I do understand, get it done, but do this too. So you're going to get 10 minutes to work, and we're going to dive into this in a second. So before we divide into rooms, I'm going to go through these next 2 slides just so everybody's like on the same page. Actually, no, we'll do this one slide and then I'll switch to the next one when we get into our rooms. I think that'll be the most helpful way to do it. So these are the scenarios. Your community has a large number of stay-at-home dads. You've been, oh, typo, that sucks. You've been wanting to engage. 2, your building had a thriving storytime culture pre-COVID. Now you're worried about the well-being of those families and you're delivering storytime via Facebook on a weekly basis. Or 3, your tab, Teen Advisory Board, was really energetic before COVID and you're worried about how to engage them moving forward. So I've got 3 different sort of age groups here, and depending on who's on your team in your room, you can approach them in different ways. For example, that second one could be about assessing or delivering SEL to the little kids, or it could be about delivering to the family unit, or it could just be about focusing on your parents. The first one could be just about the dads, but I didn't mention if they're dads of teenagers or adopted kids, or so really you have some room for creativity here. When we switch to the next screen, I'll just show you now, but we're going to go back to this in a second. You'll have the wheel up because the questions on the right, you can see you're going to, what kind of, I said online, but if you're doing in person, that's totally fine. What kind of group, what kind of program are you going to offer to this group? Which of those 5 SEL competencies are you going to address? And then those sub-facets I didn't have listed, but if you can remember one, you can do that. If you want to pull up the link that Kim gave you to CASEL's website where you can look at the subsets, feel free. And then just since we're actually talking about the SEL part of this, don't focus too heavily on the program. You can say, we're going to do a story time for these dads. It's going to be dad focused. It's less about what the program is, and it's more about this last piece. I want you to actually come up with a sentence for how you're going to communicate what you're giving this audience. So this is the bulk of the work. I don't have an example for you because I wanted to make it hard on you. And I wanted you guys to talk to each other and not just be like misled by regurgitation on my part. So I'm going to go back to that last slide so that you guys as a group can decide which scenario you want to tackle. And Kim is going to put you into rooms, right, Kim?
Yeah, well, I actually made you the host. So do you want to be able to bounce in and out of rooms? Because if you do, then you're going to need to be the host. But if you just kind of want to turn off your screen and let people do this on their own. So you're the host right now. I think I went and set everything up for you, including the setting up the time for them to have 10 minutes. And then you guys will get a 60-second countdown. You will actually have the ability in your breakout room to call Megan in for help. There's a button at the bottom that says something along the lines of like ask for help from host or something like that, and then Megan will get a message wherever she is and she can pop over to you or give you a few minutes to wait. In the chat, I have put in the Google Doc that is Megan's workbook creation, as well as the link to the SEL wheel if you want to pull that up while you're doing this work. And Megan, can I maybe suggest, do you want to put the 3 scenarios in the chat as well?
Yes.
So that maybe when people break out into their groups, they will have that information there. When you guys are in your small groups, you will be able to see the chat. So don't worry that the chat information is going to disappear when you pop into your small groups. It will still be there. Whoever's group I wind up in, because we don't have like fancy Zoom, so co-hosts, both of us can't pop around. I'm probably just going to turn my screen off and let you guys work on your own and eat these pretzels that I've got next to me. But what is going to happen is you will get a box on your screen. It will say go to room 234. You will click on that. It will take you to a room with your group. We suggest, if you're comfortable, showing your face, unmuting yourself, and talking as a group. And I believe one person from each group is sort of going to do the chatting after this is over. So Megan, if you want to click more, I think it's more, whatever you need to do to get to the breakout rooms.
There we go.
They should be all set. We're with people kind of assigned to rooms.
We're going to do it. I'm going to do this so that there are 5 rooms with 3 to 4 people per room. I think that'll be manageable for folks to have conversations via Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go ahead and do this. And when I do it, you won't see me anymore. You'll only see that timer in the countdown, but feel free to page me and I will finish up whatever I'm doing as quickly as possible. I only mean if I'm talking to somebody else, and I will join you in your room. Okay, have fun, everybody. Good, good, good. All right.
Hi, I was by myself for a while.
Are we back in the main room?
I think I am because I was by myself for a while.
Okay.
Kathy, I think we're back, but where's everybody else? Maybe you're the only one I can see. I looked at myself and I'm definitely not turning the camera on.
Kathy, you're muted.
Kathy.
Yes, sorry.
You're there. Kathy's not muted. She's there.
I just unmuted myself. Yeah, I was saying we're our own biggest critics as far as how we look and, you know, things like that.
Yeah, I have to get better at dressing up to come to these Zoom meetings. I got one tonight and I'm going to have to improve.
Just the top down, top half.
Right, just from the waist up, right?
Yep.
Waist up, okay.
Hi, friends.
Hi, Kim.
I think there must be a group who's still working through.
We didn't see in our group, we didn't see a clock of any kind. So
You know,
we
we didn't either. So this is the first time that we, like, and when I say we, I mean anyone at DLD is using breakout rooms with this particular Zoom package. And we're wondering, this is the normal meeting package. We're wondering if the workshop package, which of course is like who knows how many extra dollars, is the one that has the clock. So that's what we're thinking. But we have been in other Zooms where that's there, but you just never quite know what you're going to get with certain packages. So, but I did set it up so that it would pull us back after 10 minutes. So I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, we were just trying to guess, and we thought we were looking at the timestamp on the chat, and we thought, well, it's been almost 20 minutes, so we should probably go back.
Yeah. Here we go. We're all coming back.
Hey, everybody. I know, such good conversations. I should have known 10 minutes wouldn't be enough. But I'm just about to close all the other rooms. I just warned the last group. I was like, all right, so you got 60 seconds. So I'm just letting that time down so I can
that's fine.
Thrust them all back into our grasp.
Is it counting for you, Megan?
Nope, it's not. Weird,
I
huh?
don't know. I don't know. We tried. Sorry, these are the technical glitches that come with the Zoom world. Sorry, everyone.
I'm going to shut their rooms down and bring them all back, and I'm going to make Kim the host again.
Yes. My power. Handy that you can just like suck them back in, though, isn't it?
No, it's great. All right. That stuff is all taken care of. So.
Oh, no, it did work. Because I just got the box saying all breakout rooms will close in, and it's counting down. So we hadn't actually gone over, guys.
I think
it's not broken.
That's interesting. I thought we went over.
Oh, breakout room. No, because there's still 3 folks in room 5. I'd
Maybe
gone
it's
in
I
and I'd
clicked
set
the end room. Maybe it gives them like a minute.
Oh,
once you
maybe.
click end room.
It does. I set it up for that too.
So the rest of my folks, let's see. I need to get back to my slides.
Mm-hmm. I have some nuts, maybe.
Oh no, where did my sharing go?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me, I might have to give you co-hosting again. Yes.
Hey, Laura.
There you go. There we go. Now everybody's back.
Okay. Oh, now I can share it. Okay.
There you go.
So I'm going to bounce back into my slides so those questions come back up. And you guys, I know that was hard. I know it was a stretch, especially after sitting in a webinar or whatever you want to call it, a webinar workshop, half-day hangout for so long. But the conversations I heard you had were amazing. So I would love to sort of have the report out. And we're going to start with group 1, who I gave the hard task of like, you have 60 seconds. But if you can just sort of report out, let's try for a 2-minute time frame because we did run over and I want to make sure that we can get to everything. Tell us the scenario you chose, the simple version of the program that you decided to create to reach that group, which competency you chose, and how your program is supporting the SEL competency specifically through that sentence. Hey, Dee, if you're the sharer, Dee, you are on mute. Just a heads up.
It's Amy. I'm eating my lunch. I vote you, Amy.
Die. All right.
Sorry, I'm chewing. You don't want me to chew in the
No worries.
microphone.
All right. I'm a gabber from way back in the day. All right. So we wish that we had this right in front of us, this little slide. I don't know if that's ever going to be possible for you to sort of, because that's the thing is we forgot. We were having fun talking.
And I put it in the chat box, but you can't see it. I was like, oh, dang, this doesn't even work.
Exactly. We saw the problems, but we didn't see this. And so we got off task, and I will take the demerit.
It's okay. We all got off task.
The scenario was 2, which was for Di and myself, we do stuff with younger kids. We want to make sure that the kids that used to come to us all the time are, you know, how is their social well-being? Are they still connecting? Can we reach them? And actually, Ivory felt the same, except for she works with the older kids. So even still, though, her need was she wanted to see them and experience something with them and interact with them.
Yeah.
So our feeling is that some libraries, mine as well, are doing recorded programs and posting them. And that's all well and good. But I think that we as a group were feeling like the Zoom programs or the Google Meetup or whatever it's called would be a better fit for this need to connect.
Yep.
Good enough?
So what competency did you choose?
We chose relationship skills.
Okay, and what's your sentence for how you're gonna get this across to people?
You know, the library is working on developing more interactive programming in order to make sure that we are fostering relationship skills between our young patrons and our young patrons and ourselves.
So what I will say Amy, because I think you'll laugh with me. I challenged Amy at the very end. I was like, make it a short sentence. And she was like, we have to overthink it. But what I heard from being in your group was a lot of conversation was about what platform is best for fostering face-to-face relationships in this online world. And they talked a lot about their experiences with multiple platforms. And so although your sentence was long, it was a really good sentence for what you guys were talking about. And I like it. Good job, you guys. All right, so I'm gonna ask my group 2 people to now pipe in with your scenario you chose, the kind of program, and you can see Amy's group took it in a bit of a different direction, but it works. So all of this works. So whatever program you're going to address this group with, the competency you chose in your sentence, please.
Was I group 2?
I can't remember.
I'm like waiting to see if anybody says anything.
You were group 2.
Okay,
Group 2.
That's possible.
Yeah.
Does anybody else in my group want to say anything? They don't have to. I know only Lauren really was able to talk. Okay, so thanks, Michelle. Yeah, y'all, it's hard to facilitate, to do all the background stuff and be paying attention at all. But so we were group 2, and I didn't intend to talk in this because I'm like, this is something for you guys. This is not for me. But 2 of our partners didn't have microphones or cameras. So, I mean, we didn't want to leave our other group member to talk to herself. So we decided as a group to do number 2, and we settled on the competency of relationship building as well. But our sentence, we struggled with the sentence quite a little bit of kind of what do we say. But so then a little bit different from Amy's group, we settled on what we would say to the parents in the story time, to just kind of make it place our brains in a spot that we're used to being. So our sentence was to tell the parents that we encourage communication through the chat box. And if anyone feels comfortable turning on their screen so they can see each other, we encourage that as well. And then sort of sliding into the program itself, came up with the idea of if parents wanted to take pictures of their kids engaging in the story time, they could send them to the library and we would put together like a collage so that the kids could see their friends engaging in the same story time as them.
You know what would be incredible? Wouldn't it be just so I think about user-based design a lot, and I have this friend who's a librarian in Denver at Anythink, and she's huge into the band Phish. And we always have these conversations about how Phish taught me everything I ever needed to know about good customer service. And I walked to one of their crazy big concerts at that Air Force base when I was in high school. And so that was in like, I don't know, July or June or something. And no, it was in August. And that December, they sent everybody who went to that concert, and there were thousands, tens of thousands of people. They sent everybody a Christmas card with a picture from that event. And how incredible would it be if your parents were to opt in and take a screenshot of themselves, not the group, to create that collage and like get their permission to like send something out to all the kids of their friends. Yeah, that's really powerful. I love that. Yeah. Good job, group 2.
Thanks, group. Because I was like, what are we doing? I didn't even know. I
know. And it's hard. And okay, so group 5, let's have you chime in. Not sure who wants to be your point person. And 3 and 4, there were a couple of issues with people not coming in, so I actually shuffled some folks around.
Well, our experience was, or what we talked about was very similar to group 1 in trying to, we were doing scenario 2, in trying to keep our children engaged in story times, and we found it to be of questionable success. We've tried various formats. But one thing we then started discussing was that what we have realized is that the reason that people love story time is for the social interaction, making friends, all sitting together, both the caregivers and the children. And so we thought rather than having a, just one way Instagram type of story time, if we would try the Zoom format, which I have heard has been not so successful with other libraries either, but sort of emphasizing the social aspects of that people can see each other, and but also maybe realizing it may be more of a benefit to the adults to see each other again, maybe have an opportunity to stay on and chat and discuss, what they're doing with their kids, possibly. We don't want to encourage unsafe behavior, but possibly as a way to have them reconnect if they, enjoyed seeing each other at story time, but didn't know how to connect post story times, once the library closed, giving them a chance to reconnect, maybe get together in very small groups if they feel comfortable with that, although we wouldn't, actually put our stamp of approval, we wouldn't say either way because we're not wanting to encourage.
And that could even be as simple as not meeting face to face, but exchanging phone numbers through
True.
teaching people how to private message one another and exchange phone numbers so they could text or share photos or,
Exactly.
have a face to face hangout.
Yeah, and then maybe smaller hangouts with each other, which could be more successful for them.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, so I realized that group 3 had rejoined the main room before I got to talk to them. So good job, group 5. And group 3, do you have somebody that wants to share? Unless they, yeah, yay.
So we decided to go with the stay-at-home dads, and we wanted for them to get together and do something fun. So we thought playing games would be a fun way for them to interact both with other families that were signing in and with each other. So one game that we talked about having them do is the Little Mouse game. So it's been a while. It's just the little mouse.
Look at you.
I'm back in the building, so now I got access to stuff. So they can play the game. They can learn how to take turns and share, and it's whether it's with other people who are Zooming in for the program or people within their household, because it could be a father with siblings or cousins or something that are all doing it together. And so they've got to listen to how the game is played, and then we can share it later.
It's so fun.
And then so we tied it into relationship skills, because they would be developing a fun relationship with their adult, which right now might be kind of hard because adults are having to do so many different things. So taking that time to have some fun playing a game, and then they could also replicate the game themselves. And even if they don't have access to, like a magnet board or whatever, they can play it on a table. They can play it on the floor. They can cut things out of, any kind of, paper, and they can get into drawing and really making it their own. So they can continue to play afterwards. And one of the things too that we talked about is that, they want to play over and over again. And 9 times out of 10, the house that the mouse was found under is the first house that they guess in the next round of the game.
Mm-hmm. So I can't remember the chant, but like you put the mouse like under like the red house, and there's some chant like little mouse, are
you in the red house?
And then the kids will be like, green, or you have them raise their hand or whatever. And then you flip it back and it's like, no. And you keep going until they get the right house. And then you cover the board and hide it somewhere else. And 20 minutes, or the entire story time.
So it's like a shell game with mice and houses.
Yes.
Okay.
Super cool. And I love the idea that, not everybody could potentially sign up in advance, but if they could, you could send them a file that they could print or replicate ahead of time and do it live. Or if they participated in the program even and gave you an email address, then you could send it to them. That's really great. You guys all did such a good job. And I know that in the moments where I was like, how's it going? You were like, But that's that's applying any new knowledge to the stuff you've already done. And I told one group, so much of this work of creation, we get bogged down in the idea of it has to be perfect before we release it. And really in these exercises that we're doing today, it's more about, don't worry about perfection. Don't worry about things you know will fail. As I'm sure you've all read or heard the stuff about how we essentially as public librarians have a responsibility to be early adopters of technologies or of ideas for the public, for our families. And so part of this is going to be slippery and tricky and result in, I wouldn't even call it failure, but lessons learned about how to move forward and keep adapting. So I'm really impressed that you guys all pulled it out. Thank you for your hard work. I'm sorry, my computer decided to just like almost die, so I had to run and get my emergency cord. And now I'm hoping the light's still okay.
Yeah, you're
so
good.
We're gonna move on. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so having said that, living in this outer ring, we have unique challenges. The amount of time that we have per interaction. If you go to CASEL's website and read about how to engage with students and do this effectively as a teacher, teachers have those kids in the room for a lot longer than we as public librarians do, or those patrons in the room. We don't have attendance required. We aren't going to see these kids 5 days this week and ensure that we can continue building the lessons we're offering them. And so we have to supply this knowledge in smaller bite-sized pieces. One group was talking about what's worked at their library with these online story times. And the person who was speaking said that she's also done smaller tidbits. And I never like programming, my brain never stops. And I was just thinking how good it could be as a parent to have, instead of a whole story time for me to log in with Felix and watch at a random time in our day, just to have my library having posted like, here's your new song for today, try this one out. Or here's that new lap sit. This is good for blah, blah, blah. And so that's an example of giving that social emotional learning interaction, handing it off to your parent and giving them the sentence about here's what you're offering your child when you do this.
And if I could interject, I'd like to say, I know there's a million people who probably do this, but one that I follow personally because I worked there, but obviously I didn't have anything to do with this because I wasn't there, is Ferguson. So I see on Instagram, there will be a recording of, like, this is such and such laps at the elevator song. And here's why you might do this with your kids. And here's when you might do it. And then, it's a bit, elevator up, and then it's like, let's do it but it's just like one song or one story or one lap rhyme for like that parent to kind of take for the day. So follow them on Instagram if you'd like to see some sort of live examples of that. And that's not to say that everyone, I'm just saying, I'm sorry, I can't follow everyone on Instagram, but that's just one that I have seen that I think is great.
And the final interaction the interaction challenge that one of Group 1 was talking about initially when I peeked my head in there, and the second time, the one-sided recordings are online programs and feeling disconnected from your audience. And it's just something that exists. And I'm not saying I have the solution. I'm just stating these are problems that we face when delivering SEL competencies. However, there are benefits too to being a public librarian and not a school librarian. We have partnerships. We can create partnerships moving forward, especially if you have a school or a classroom specifically, or even just one teacher that's already engaging in SEL. Reach out to them and find out if they'll be a guest star for you. Find out if you can support their classroom as we move forward with this school year somehow, or their school by providing videos that assist their efforts. And of course, Kim mentioned thinking beyond into, like, if you are in New Haven and you've never partnered with that one museum, like, now's the time to give it a shot. We have that flexibility. We also have the flexibility to try something and decide that it failed and move on. We can pivot and we can keep moving forward. And finally, we have the benefit of being a third place for a lot of our people, which means that whereas schools, okay, so they have the time and they have the audience built in, they don't necessarily always have the trust and the relationships with their kids and with their parents that we do. And that's something that really can benefit our efforts to assist them in SEL moving forward. So quick poll, just to touch base with folks. Are you familiar with library audits? Are you unfamiliar with library audits? Or are you just plain terrified of the word audit, which is the camp I used to lie in, for full disclosure. So go ahead and respond to this poll and we'll sort of figure out at what speed I need to do the next couple slides. Ooh, yay. So I'm almost seeing a perfect split between familiar and unfamiliar. Oh, now it's more unfamiliar. We've got a couple people that are terrified of the word audit, and I understand as a non-math person.
Well,
Okay.
it sounds like taxes, you know?
Yeah, I know. It sounds like punishment.
But like your books, we got to audit your books, and then the IRS comes for you. It's just, yeah.
So scary. Okay, so I'm going to share this quickly so you can see 60% of us are unfamiliar, and then we're sort of split between, oh, I'm familiar, and oh, I'm familiar and I want nothing to do with it. So I will say that having lived in the scared of audits camp, you don't need to be scared. This is actually really exciting, especially when it comes down to the warm and fuzzies, which we aren't super good at quantifying and communicating with people. So audits are just powerful tools that help you measure the impact you're having on your community. So they're goal-centered, they're data-driven, they hold you accountable so that even though that really cool, tech gear thing just came out, it's not in line with what we're focused on for right now, so we're gonna pass. And it's credibility, and accountability and credibility can sound very scary, just like that word audit, but really what it allows you to do is show powerful numbers to your community, to your board, to your administration, to your funding sources, to your potential grant sources, and show them what a great job you're doing at this work already and how you plan to move forward. It can help with decision making, as I mentioned before, and it's a really good way to give some positive reinforcement to your staff who right now are scared, and like the whole world is scared. So it's a really powerful way to go to a story time that they're doing. For example, I use that example a lot. Go to a story time or a program that they're doing, take the workbook that I gave you, tick off boxes where you're like, I see her doing this, or he's really good at explaining this to kids in a way that I am not. And taking that back to them and saying, you know where you're doing a killer job in an area of our world where relationships are a problem is here, here, and here. It's also a super way to encourage your parents and the patrons who are at home trying to do this hard work and feeling very isolated. And then finally, if you do have any kind of needs assessment that you're working off of, you can pair a social emotional learning audit with that for some supercharged results. And I won't go too far down that rabbit hole. So audit types, we're familiar with a few different kinds. We already talked about financial audits and how scary that is. Operational audits you may have heard of as well. And then a newer audit that a lot of folks are doing that we've already touched on is the EDISJ audits, equity, diversity, inclusion, and social justice. And if you're looking to learn more about that, I would check out the work of Karen Jensen. She's written some excellent articles and has screenshots of her spreadsheets and a step-by-step process that you can follow to perform your own audit. When it comes to areas of our work that we perform these audits in, typically people think of like collections, especially when it comes to diversity audits. However, you can also do programming audits. You can do an audit of your marketing, of your staffing, your hiring process, your policies, your volunteer program, where you're recruiting your employees and your volunteers, spaces where you do outreach. So really anything is auditable. Auditable. I hate that word. So as far as why perform these audits, and I'm thinking specifically about SEL at the moment. So these are all screenshots that I grabbed from CASEL from their research. Yeah, from their research area on their website. And I've got all these, I've got like bubbles all over from the chat box and the videos. So I'm gonna like scoot a couple things over so I can read more effectively. Okay, so I'm not gonna read all of this to you, but what really stood out to me are the places. And this is when I was earlier talking about the relationships and the community building that they do, the collaboration. So the American Enterprise Institute and the Brookings Institution, those are places that we've both probably heard of. And these main blue areas are what you want to focus on. So the fact that they can help reduce poverty, improve economic mobility, that is a very library related idea that we've all been working on lately, or forever. They lead to, the use of SEL leads to academic outcomes and improved behaviors. And what I loved about this was it was a meta-analysis of 213 studies and over 270,000 students. So the research that they're doing is super large scale. And then it follows up at the end with questions that you may hear from your administration or staff members or self. Should we use this? Would a new program really be helpful or worthwhile? This one I was super impressed by. The impact is long-term and global. And so this analysis was 82 studies and over 100,000 students. And I loved that they're being done all over the world because it shows that, like I said before, these aren't political ideas, these are human ideas. And humanity, being kind, having empathy is something that works for everyone no matter where you are. And then finally, I like this one because it mentions, it improves the lifetime outcomes. So yeah, it's talking about skills in kindergarten and that kind of thing, but also this last part, where is it? Decreases the likelihood of living in or being on a waiting list for public housing, receiving public assistance, having any involvement with police before adulthood, and ever spending time in a detention facility. And I read that, I was already a believer in this, and then I read that and I just could not believe that it could, it's not one thing, but that SEL, a focus on SEL, could have that big an impact on this many types of people all around the world. So another good reason is just the year we're having. It's not even been a year yet, but if you sort of focus on 2020 as a catalyst for why do this work, several important things, all joking aside, several important things are happening in our backyards and in our greater backyard as a country. So we are experiencing the greatest political divide that's ever existed in our history as a nation. We have nationwide civil unrest and not just something that's being highlighted in one city. We are experiencing a global pandemic. We are also finding that the inherently racist, sexist, every other ist system that our patrons have to maneuver daily are being called out. And then you've got charming little, things that really aren't having an impact on us, like murder hornets and meth gators, if you're in Tennessee. But the one thing that these, oh yeah, it's a funny story, but for a little while, meth gators was in the news. I'll tell you at the end if we have time. Just remind me, okay, Amy? Okay. So what these things all have in common, because they are vastly different and terrifying in their own arenas or pockets, is that they're all about unpacking trauma. And it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter politically what side you lie on for any of this. You all have to face them. And we all have to do some soul searching. And if you're not a reflective person who's able to grow and learn, it's terrifying. Because of that, these are all also technically opportunities for growth if we can communicate SEL ideologies and practices with our children, if we can get our parents communicating that way within their family homes. It seems like it's all for the kids, right? But really, if an adult is passing these messages along, they're also thinking about them and reflecting upon them. So this is my last one, kids and parents. I didn't click it soon enough. So it really hits them both. Okay, and here's how to get started. The first thing you do is you get a baseline, and that could be really anything. And in my research, which is not super vast, I'll be the first to admit it, I can't find any academic papers about social emotional learning audits in libraries. So this is new work, but what I will offer you is the auditing sort of procedure and how you can do it with SEL. So you get a baseline, and that could be something like your own mission statement. If it could be your vision statement, your core values. If you have a 1, 5, 10, 6-month year plan, any strategic partnerships, if that's written out anywhere. And if you also have anything written about organizational culture, these can all be useful documents especially if you can assess all of them. If you have an actual needs assessment that you're working off of for another larger project, that can be really helpful too. Next, you want to determine your goals. And to do this, I like to say you really need to harness your inner project manager. And to do that, it basically means staying focused. So like Amy, I was joking before when I was like, make it a short sentence. But what does success look like? It's clear, it's succinct, and it's data-driven. It needs to be something that everybody can read and understand without having to unpack terms. And this is sort of funny, like maybe you're in charge of the SEL audit and you're determining the goals for it. And so you do that first step first, but maybe you're not, and you know that developing a team is what you need to do. So really that, what does success look like, and assemble a team are interchangeable depending on your situation. But you need to assemble a team because one voice is fine. It's good to be the expert, but a group project is always going to be more powerful when it comes to this. And it could be people inside your building. It could be stakeholders. It could be patrons. It could be those educators in the community that you're going to be working with in the fall. After that, you want to create a timeline of when you're going to get this work done. You want to assign persons responsible to specific tasks and tie them back to that timeline. And then you, as the project manager or the leader of this group, you want to communicate. And that's everything from, hey, don't forget this is due on this date, to, hey, I know this is due on this date. I just wanted to check in. Is there anything you need from me? And then when you have that next meeting and everybody checks in on those goals, you keep building. That's just you. You're the communicator. That way people don't feel siloed and left out. Okay, so you'll get a team together, and then you're going to review those documents, whether it's your mission statement or your community partners' mission statements, your needs assessment, whatever it is, core values. And as a team, you're going to assess those statements in terms of these 5 SEL competencies. And now that we've done some of that work, like, you're like, oh, yeah, it was hard, but you definitely started getting it. And when you have a team of people working together, I promise you it will be a lot of conversation, but it will get easier. And then you're going to determine, what do these statements and relationships tell you about your focus and where your focus should be on providing SEL support within your community. Then you'll get to assessing some programs, and we're going to do this in just a minute. The workbook that I have sent all of you will help, definitely. It is a baseline. We're all super different. So as you go through this, you're going to be developing what we call an auditing tool. And it's highly, highly individual based on the size of your organization, based on the community you're working within, those SEL goals that you wind up determining. And it could be something like a spreadsheet. It could be as simple as a pencil and paper. Or it could get really advanced and nerdy and lovely, and it could go from spreadsheet into Google Forms, where you develop like a criteria that people assess one another with, and that all gets generated into some really beautiful infographics that you share with your stakeholders. And then, once you've assessed some programs, or all of your programs, depending on how you do it, you're going to take a look at your data. You're going to compare things against your goals. Are things in line? Usually they are not. And that is not failure. That's just taking your temperature, seeing where you are, so that you can start the real work of adjusting and setting some new goals. This is all about, okay, I have my data. I know we wanted to be, addressing all 5 areas. I wanted to see especially work on empathy and relationship building skills in this new online world that we're living in. Turns out we're much better at social awareness because of our programming, like Lynn's program with the elderly patrons about civic stuff. So we need to adjust things a little bit. So once you take a look at all these things, you're going to determine, how will you adjust to meet your initial goals? Are you going to address the existing programming you already have? Do you need to create new programming? Does that involve staff training? Should you be involving some of those partners who you already have, or creating new partnerships so that you're not reinventing the wheel and stealing thunder away from another organization that might already be doing this work? And again, harness your inner project manager, and don't just get carried away, because we have a tendency to overthink things, and you don't have to. If you stay organized and stay focused, it makes this work a lot easier. And then you just sort of rinse and repeat. And in the EDISJ audits that I coach, I tell people this work is a lot like weeding. It's beautiful. It's never done. And so what starts as a massive assessment and audit should be instead broken into a bite-sized piece, which is what we're about to try in a moment. Once you get a taste for that piece, and we're going to go through this today, and it'll probably feel a little clunky because of the way this is and the way this new information is, but you'll have dipped your feet into the waters of SEL assessment. And then when you try it again, it'll come a little easier. So the work never really ends, just like weeding. And you may find that this becomes the kind of thing where it's like, oh, we're doing our annual audit of programs. We're doing our annual self-assessment of SEL offerings that we feel are our strengths. However your individual system or building decides to take this. Okay, so this is just a recap. And before we move forward, I'm just wondering if anybody has questions about the process.
Get some water in there, got the whole place smelling like that.
Looks like we're good. But if a question pops up, feel free to type it in the chat, or like we said, go ahead and unmute yourself, say something. And again, if I mute you, which is because there's background noise, you can unmute yourself when it's done and say whatever.
All right, we're gonna dive on in then. So I hope folks were able to print their SEL tool. If you did get to print it, go ahead and pull that out now. What we're gonna do is take a look at this tool, this workbook, on a page-by-page basis, and then we're gonna break out and you're actually gonna do it. It's about yourself. And so my director, who's like, oh, I'm not front-facing really anymore, just remember a time when you were. This doesn't have to be anything specific in particular to right now, and I think you'll see why. So first, page 1. Oh, there it is, okay. You are going to take a look at just the basics of the program. What's the name of the program? Who's the audience? And check as many boxes as you need to. Who are the people that I'm trying to reach through this type of program? And what type of program does it fall under? And I included some types there, but again, we're all different, so there is an other section if it's none of those things. Next page, you actually dive into the hard work of how do I provide social emotional learning when it comes to self-management. And so you've got a checkbox for each of the 6 subcomponents, but you also have a line where you can jot down a note about how you think you're doing that. And part of the work before of like, try and make it a succinct sentence was to do with this. So you can say for self-management, I'm very good at self-motivation during my programs because I'm constantly piping in and saying, good job, oh, that was a really cool idea, or I like the way that you did that. Like I'm very supportive in my dialogue during programming. Just one example. On page 3, you'll dive into self-awareness, and it's the same exact thing. So you've got your check boxes and you've got your area for notes. Page 4 is the same, but in regards to social awareness. And I did put the definition of each of those at the top, just so it would hopefully be helpful. Page 5 is relationship skills. Page 6 is responsible decision making. And then the last 2 pages are about moving forward. So helping you unpack the process of undergoing this assessment of yourself and really recognizing your strengths or ideas that this gave you when you started thinking critically about the way that you offer programming. So let me see. We are going to pull this thing out, and I was originally going to take about a half hour, and I think that still works, but I'm really going to have to stick to the timer this time.
I'll keep you. I'll keep you on clock.
Okay, so we don't go over. And I have a couple extra slides. I'm going to leave my slide deck up this time, so I'll be able to see the chat. I'll be able to see all you guys. None of this will go anywhere. So if you need me to back up to a certain slide, pipe up. If you have a specific question, let me know. And I do have some like 10 minutes left, 5 minutes left, 1 minute left slides. So I'm going to start my own timer.
It's so funny.
At the same time, that's my baby. So that we can all stay on track. Hey, Google, set a timer for 30 minutes. Oh, it's real. My house just told me. Okay, so
I don't know how we did it. How did we do it before Google and Alexa?
I don't either. So go ahead, start these tools. dig into the hard work. And I'm gonna also, I'll do it simultaneously and be kind of harsh on myself.
And I am on the chat, and like Megan said, she can see, she can, you know, open up the chat. So if you have any questions, if you want some clarification, please go ahead and type that in there, and we will walk you through this.
Yep.
I went through a thing called Future School, and I think the Healing Library is similar to that, where it's kind of changing the way that you're thinking about things. And the instructor said, you're tired and your brain hurts because we're rewiring your brain, kind of asking you to look at something from a different side of the coin. So if you need a little help with some clarity, type it in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask it.
Oh, and I have, let's see, where's my, this one. Oh, come back to me. Okay, yeah. Take a big drink of water, pop on some tunes. I have a recommended little 23-minute long micro concert there if you're into surf rock and ladies. It's an all-girl group called La Luz that I love. Or in the chat, I'm also, oh, never mind, I'm not gonna do that. Yeah, enjoy yourself. And what else was I gonna say? Oh, just in relation to what Kimberly was mentioning, if you feel yourself getting stuck or overthinking, somebody in a workshop I was an attendee of once said this to me, and it's really stuck with me. This isn't about responding, it's about reacting. So just remember, it's almost like the first thing that pops in your head, go ahead and write it down. This isn't about perfection. This is about your own headspace. And I hear my baby's awake. My husband is on the phone, so I'm just gonna make sure he knows that the baby's awake. I'll be right back. Oh.
Do you see that question, Megan, from Amy? Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure.
I guess I should have said that. I can pipe up. Okay.
Fine.
Yeah, Amy asked, just in case anybody's listening, Amy asked a good question. Is this a pre-COVID program or a current program? And I said it could be either, but really for the sake of like getting mentally through this exercise, thinking pre-COVID will probably be easier. And there's nothing wrong with doing this in an easy way as we're getting started. In fact, it's usually encouraged. You know, when I coach those EDISJ audits on collections, I'm always telling people to choose a small piece of their collection that'll be easy to wrap your head around. Specifically, like juvenile biographies are the place to start.
Oops. Doesn't make any sense anyway.
Hey, everybody. So we have just under 10 minutes left to work, and I wanted to share sort of where I am in my evaluation of myself, my assessment. I've got all five areas filled out and boxes ticked, and I personally will do a little tally at the bottom, and just as sort of like I don't, you know, I'm not a math person necessarily, but I do, like, I understand data. So I've now seen that the program I'm assessing myself about, I was shocked that the biggest tally I got was responsible decision making. It's not something I'm known for. But it was a maker program, and so it kind of makes a lot of sense now that I'm thinking about it and moving through pages 7 and 8. I was surprised that responsible decision making was my highest area. I checked all 6 boxes for this program, but it's also not surprising because I worked with sewing machines with kids, and you give them a lot of responsibility when you turn them over to something that can stab them. So they kind of have to be making responsible decisions if they aren't going to impale themselves. So I'm going to move through 7 and 8 now and give myself some time to think about that. But if you have any questions, pipe up or send me a private chat, as some folks have done, and I'm happy to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
Got about 5 minutes left, everybody. All right, everybody, so we've got about a minute left, and don't feel like if you didn't finish this, you didn't finish. Like, just finish the idea you're working on. The process of this is more important than finishing. Okay, pencils down or fingers off keyboard. So I don't know, I got something I wasn't expecting out of that, which I was like, oh, I'll just do this with them and I'll, you know, I know this stuff. And I was really surprised by what being honest with myself about a program wound up looking like. And I'll just share a tidbit because the nitty gritty isn't important. It was a program I ran called So What for all ages. And where did I write it? Oh, so the question on page 8 that says, did this experience give you ideas for new programs or changes to make the existing program? And I said, I never leave room for that follow-up piece in my work. And I was thinking it could be better if I sent people home with a little like postcard that said like, you might think that you made a teddy bear today, but what you actually accomplished was, and then highlighting some of these SEL terms. I could be much more impactful with a bit more work and planning and breathing. So if anybody has something like that that they want to share, or a surprise that came out of this, or not, that's fine too. But if you have something you want to share, pipe in, and I'm going to go to this next slide just so we can keep moving because we don't have a ton of time left.
And again, if anyone wants to share, feel free to unmute and say your words. If you do not have the ability to unmute, or if you would just prefer not to, you can also type in the chat.
Yes. So I'm gonna it's feel like rushing through some of this next stuff, but luckily it's all really self-explanatory. The hard part about doing this kind of work is that it often leads to all kinds of things. It might be a deeper dive. So for me, when I say, this is literally me, when I'm supporting appreciating diversity and social awareness competency, what forms of diversity am I actually referring to? Like, am I talking about physical abilities? Am I actually doing the work in that arena? Am I only talking about racial diversity? It can lead to further assessment, which might just mean sitting in on guest programs to determine, all right, so we have these goals now for social emotional learning, and we have these partners who come in and teach programs. Are they actually doing any of this work without even realizing it? What kind of impact are we having in that area? Also, I mentioned staff strengths before. It's a great way to reinforce to your staff that they do wonderful work. And I would probably avoid saying like, you're really good at relationship skills, but you're not as good at this part. Usually that's all they're gonna hear. So I would stay focused on strengths since we're talking about social emotional learning and not tearing down accidentally.
Well, and speaking of strengths, we had a share, and I just wanted to toss that in there. So Kelsey shared that she runs an anime program for tweens and teens and young adults, and that it actually covered a lot more social and emotional learning than she would have anticipated for that program.
Yay,
so
Kelsey!
It was like a positive surprise because she's doing more than she thought. So I mean, like, what a fascinating, I'm not saying Anime Club is the appropriate spot for like a note card if like you think you just watched anime today, but you know, like it's a really good thing to have on in your mind as you're doing that. So thank you, Kelsey, and congratulations.
That's brilliant. I used to have a K-pop
Yes.
K-pop idol, we called it, or something, where my sister-in-law is from Korea, and she would send us like the top 10 videos of the moment, and then we would assess them under what we defined as being good K-pop and send her students the results back. But that was a great opportunity to talk about cultural differences, like face to face as a group, not necessarily a card. So awesome, Kelsey. And then getting nerdy with some data is somewhere else you might see this going. Google Form printouts, creating spreadsheets. But I'm sure as you were doing this, you can imagine this is just one program. If you were to assess multiple programs, I actually tried creating a spreadsheet to share with you guys today, and it was so beefy and horrendous to look at. I was like, this will help nobody. I'm like, unless I'm hired as a consultant to create one of these for you, there's no point. But again, just recognizing that it's going to be highly personalized.
And if anyone is really interested in creating some data and wants someone who is sort of the guru of data and spreadsheets, I encourage you to contact Maria Bernier, the data consultant up here with me at the Service Center. She is happy to send you resources and things so that you can create kits. I would also suggest that, this might be a really fascinating time to dig into project outcomes through PLA. Hopefully I'll have something put together with them to present to you guys all soonish. It's on the list. But if you are really someone who's very data driven and wants an infographic and like all of that, reach out to Maria and or do some of your own research on project outcome until I can get something organized for the state.
And if this exercise got you jazzed about this kind of assessment, I again just remind you to harness that inner project manager, stay focused so that you can have the best possible outcome from this kind of work. And actually, we're just going to keep going. So here's the good news. If you were like doing this and you kind of got bummed out by a program you thought was checking off boxes that it's not, we've done a lot of this work for you to ensure that every kit is meeting needs in all 5 areas. In the grant language section of our website, you can actually cut and paste. And I'm not going to read you all of these. Sometimes there's time, but we had a very active and participatory group today, which is better than me reading these slides. It's all in the grant language section, but I'll show you just one example of how we meet those needs. We have this all set up in that grant language section so that you can essentially just cut and paste it into your grants that you're all going to send Kim, that you're all going to win.
Send. We will hand you all the money. And get all the money.
But an example of how the Healing Library is tackling self-management. There is recognition of emotions through parent-led discussions in the topic discussion guide and in the book discussion guides. We're creating a channel of communication between parents or other safe adults through the discussion guides and building that language for them. And then there are experiences for coping, which are provided in the activities guide. So that's just a quick example of short sentences. You can cut and paste. You may enhance if you need to. I'm going to burn through these. And this is also on the website. I'm not going to read it, but I am going to read you this quick letter from a parent in Montana who borrowed a kit. She was actually the first person to borrow one of the 3 kits that they purchased from us through a grant. So she said, "Thank you so much for letting our family use the Pet Death Healing Library this weekend. It has been tremendously helpful for all of us. We started with the books on Friday evening. I was worried about A because he hadn't cried yet. I read 2 of the books, crying intermittently throughout, and A asked if he could read the 3rd book. As he was reading, he teared up and finally allowed himself to really cry." I have my tissues this time. "We all cried and held each other. He finally opened up and started to progress along the grief journey. The power of books. Saturday, we made the bracelets, 1 for each kiddo. B loves wearing hers, and A placed his on his backpack. A's is purple, like Maddie's collar. Today, we made a memory book, and I know this will mean a lot to A and us indefinitely. He designed the book to be that when we have a memory we want to share, we write it in the book. Then when we're missing her..."
Do you want me to finish it?
Yeah.
Okay. Then when we're missing her, we can pick up the book and read through the memories that we've written over time. He put it on a windowsill, easy access for all of us, and we walked by it several times a day with a pen so it's ready whenever we need it. Thank you so very much. I'll return the kit on Monday. Best regards, Elle, and our very grateful family.
So I share this not to make myself cry in front of a room of strangers, but rather to show that if you're like us, you've been thinking in these terms for a while, you can read this letter and pick up all these pieces that this family has experienced that I didn't know it would go this route when I was designing, you know. We didn't know that it would have this particular impact, but to get these letters from people who have engaged is incredibly powerful. So here's how you can get started. If you go to our website, which is thehealinglibraryus.com, you can just click free downloads, and then all the titles you'll see are listed right there, including our logos if you need to utilize those for any sort of like web creation or content or whatever that you're doing, flyers. You click on the title and boom, you have automatically downloaded a PDF for free. And that's all of the paper materials that I showed you today. Then from there, you will either explore the kit. Again, I always mention like, take a look at it ahead of time to be sure you know what you're doing, especially that librarian guide. You can shop and assemble the pieces that you need to complete your kit, or you can explore those pieces, those resources, those printouts, and plan your remote sharing strategy. Next, once you've got this thing together and you're feeling very, like maybe literate's the wrong word, but literate in the contents and the goals that you have for this and the audience you're going to serve, then it's time to reach out. So share it with your local professionals, your teachers, childcare centers, health specialists, funeral homes, humane societies, assisted living facilities, hospice organizations, doctors' offices, even print and face-to-face news organizations and radio. Anything you can do to get it out there is helpful to these families. Then you begin distributing, and hopefully you share the news with us so that I can cry in front of more strangers someday. If you do get to this point, you decide you want to assemble a kit, I again encourage diversity. I encourage your user-based design. And for both of those, I say be reflective of the people you're aiming to lend this to. Represent their diversity in experiences, in color, in sexuality, whatever it is. And then again, be data driven if you can, because if parents ever have a problem with what you're lending, you have, you know, resources to back you up.
Mm-hmm. And maybe consider, don't just look at your community, maybe look at the state, look at the country, because eventually this child's gonna leave, like even if they just leave for college and come back. So, you know, if you're in, you know, I'm gonna say Middletown because that's where I am, eventually you will leave Middletown. Like eventually you will take a vacation and you will go somewhere, and you and your child will see different types of people, you know, and we all know that exposing them to different types of people in books in sort of a controlled environment where the parent or guardian can then address any questions that may come is a really great step.
And then again, you've got your data to back you up.
Absolutely.
So you can say, this may not be reflective of what our little town looks like, but it is our county or it is our state's data. And so you're always able to turn it back to like, oh, I didn't make that decision. Turns out we're diverse and you didn't realize it. Alternatively, kits are available for purchase, and I only wanted to show these so you can, again, spatially kind of understand. The clear plastic case is our version of a small kit that could technically be shelved with your other materials, so there were absolutely no barriers and people could just take it off the shelf and check it out. The tote bag is a tote bag, and then the rolling duffel is the size that has everything in that kit, every book, every activity built out fully. Common concerns and solutions. Again, I'm going to burn through this, but one size doesn't fit all, and I recognize that. These are the most common.
Can I just jump in real quick?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. We've got a question from Trisha. I hope I said that right, Trisha. Can these documents be translated into Spanish? They have a large Spanish-speaking community, and they want to make sure that language isn't a barrier.
That's a great question. I've found my Spanish translator, and now I'm doing workshops like this so that I can pay her. So in time, yes, but she's also the mother of 2 small kids, and I will not give you a timeline because I really don't know when they'll be available, but I'd say if you have someone locally you could pay to do it, this would come out of a programming budget for sure. And that there would be no harm, no foul in that.
And can be written into the grant application.
Yes.
If you've got 2 or 3 languages, say like Spanish and Turkish, I would write that into your grant application that you would like to make sure that every piece of paper that leaves with this kit comes in multiple languages, and, you know, throw those price estimates in there as well.
And if you decide you want to share that with me, and I'll credit you in your library and translator and send you delicious, lovely goodie. Delicious is the wrong word. I use that for everything. I will send you healing library related appropriate gifts. So these are common problems that people bring up and the solutions that we've had. So if you're building your own, storage is a problem. We all have those rooms that are full of everything. All the materials fit in a suitcase, but think about your space. Can you hang backpacks or totes from the backs of doors, from the ceiling? Do you have space up there? Giant big binders, like those 6-inch binders with zipper pencil cases inside. A collapsible box like we bring to Storytime sometimes, and then the components can be housed on a shelf and then assembled when a patron needs them. A gym bag, or one of those under the bed rolly totes that we can put under a shelf or a desk potentially. Replenishing the materials can be scary for some people. You can always raid your supply closet, but there are also things like an Amazon wish list or a holiday supply drive that you could do, posters asking for donations, grants, in fact, micro grants, because most of these you can outfit for under $500. And then sponsorships. Do you have a local hospital or hospice organization that wants to sponsor a kit component from your Death of a Loved One series?
These also might work for humanities grants, Connecticut humanities grants, for the record, everybody. And humanities does, well, I haven't looked into what's going on since COVID, but they would do mini grants, and they did a different one every single month. So ours are typically bigger through the state, but humanities, yes, they have grants, and they pick grant winners every single month. So, I mean, this is something that feasibly you can look at, and if those mini grants are still happening the way they were pre-COVID, and get something pulled together by like September or October if you're like super ambitious and bored, because none of us have anything to do, right? But I just, for people who are thinking we don't have the money, you know, who are kind of caught in the loop of paying for this and paying for a translator, the state process can be a bit lengthy, but that's just because there are reasons for that. But I believe this would also qualify for Connecticut Humanities, and they do have types of grants that have that move a little quicker than ours. So just wanted to throw that out there. I'm sorry.
And depending on the size of the sort of overall container you have, you may be struggling with, well, like pencil cases don't work and now hard plastic cases don't work. But think about zippered pouches, really sturdy Ziploc containers. If this is just a beta situation, those like sandwich meats that come in the hard plastic cases that will do okay for a while. Even travel-sized containers for like shampoo or soaps can be a good way to put together tiny versions of activities, and kids love tiny anything, you know? Even spice jars. Can you roll up the paper and put it into a spice jar so that they're like unpacking a little treasure? And then the big one, of course, how do I transform this lending item into a programming item? And so I mentioned that library in Vermont that's purchased multiple kits, and she's going to host an activity session as a recording, and she'll be diving into the SEL language as she's giving that. You could also run workshops or demos for those partner organizations. So think outside your own walls. I know we're all getting a lot better at that, whether it's me going to the tea shop or going to another organization. Like, you don't know what Tree Street Youth is because you don't live in Maine. But you have all these partners who are interested in this work and could benefit from you showing up. So even if you feel like, oh, our Storytime audience isn't here and they just aren't logging in like they used to, who else is doing this work? I'm sure all of us would love to have a knowledgeable speaker come in and take a session off of our hands. And then finally, you can mimic the contents for to-go programs. So you don't have to give them a full kit. However, you could have highlight the ebooks that you have options of this available for, supplement with those discussion guides and the overall guides, and then have one activity. Again, that was something like the Make a Journal activity is a really good one, because all you need is a stapler and some paper, and a stapler will be easy enough to clean when it comes back in-house. Or you can have one of those tiny sort of Destructo staplers that you just let go out the door. If it's a sketching or drawing program, the colored pencils or crayons and paper that you give, you don't ever need to have those come back. And then that's another way that you're able to show your impact within your community. Okay. This is in case you want anything more. And you can get a hold of, it says like website and email, and it all looks very formal, but really, you know, it's me. So if you send an email to the Healing Library US, it's that's me.
I can attest to that, because you said the exact same thing in the workshop I was in, and I was like, okay, well, let's see. And then she's like,
I wrote
"Hey,
you back
Megan."
that afternoon.
Yeah. So absolutely, I can attest to all of this, because I stumbled across her in the same way that you guys are, only it wasn't 4 hours, it was like 20 minutes. So
I know, it's so fast.
yeah.
But I thank you all, especially for your interest in this kind of work and for attending today. And, you know, if you've stuck it out this far, wow, thanks.
Yes, I know things were so difficult with curbside. I've had a few people send me emails like, it's just getting crazy here and I have to go help. So, I mean, we appreciate you. And if you've had to pop in and out and missed bits and pieces of this, like I said, we did record it. So I can make sure that gets to you all. But does anyone have any questions?
Oh, thanks, you guys. Oh.
Thank you, everybody. I'm actually going to stop recording now, because it's just going to be weird at this point. But